Insert video. We have video. I'm gonna go around to the other and make sure it gets nice.
Well, that's why I'm trying to connect them. Okay, there we go. Okay, so they're connected.
Will it like automatically pair with?
It should, so yeah, you don't have to do anything there, because what happens is that one is paired with this one, and then this one is connected to that.
Check, check. Does it show me up close over here? Check, check.
I think there's too much background noise, but.
Oh, but yeah, it is working. I see. Perfect. Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, we just need to check and see if folks online here. Can folks joining in online hear us okay?
This is Paul from Lincoln County. Yep, I can hear you.
So much, Paul. Appreciate it.
I can hear you.
Yeah, like that. That way I can see who's got their hand up.
Yeah.
Who to call.
So, thank you so much. All right, everyone online, thanks for your patience. We're just gonna get settled in here. Background noise in the meantime. We'll get started soon.
So about a 2-minute warning, folks. About a 2-minute warning.
I was asking, yeah, I think it's covered as far as content for the major topics, and sort of what are the questions that
The chairs are more comfortable than the position.
So, yeah, so Ginger, she'll be here in about 20 minutes. Yeah, yeah.
I think what I was saying is
Not yet, but you can read it, spokes model.
and
Yeah, Ginger, your email says.
yeah. You know, I really don't know. I think that might be
Yeah, I think you just need to grab your little. Well, no, like, you mean task wise, or why do I choose to do that? Well, so my day job, I work for the city. So I work for, right now I work for a representative of the Fort Worth. I previously worked for the so I do a lot of sort of, especially as we get closer to policy, draft, outreach, and that kind of stuff, as well as some communication stuff. Currently, I work for but yeah, it's good stuff. I love doing this kind of stuff. Some type of weird energy. I feel like some people, you know, I think get drained by these type of things. But, yeah, I like it. What about you? Well, good for you.
30-second warning, folks. 30-second warning.
Oh, boy,
So
okay.
the first thing that you're.
So were you like a oh, okay. Wow. So what's the thing here? There you go. That'll do. Well, good. We're glad to have you here.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is October 27th, 2022 at 3:02 p.m. And this is the October 27th Benton County Talks Trash Work Group meeting. My name is Sam Imperati and I am your facilitator. Thank you all for coming, both members and audience. And thank you for those who are appearing via Zoom. And the usual protocol is if you are a work group member on Zoom, if you could show us your smiling face. And for those of you who are not work group members, we ask that you close your camera until the public comment period time to go forward so I can see a little more readily who has their hand in the air for what reasons. So the review of the agenda, it's pretty straightforward. We are at a turning point here, taking our work from primarily happening in formal work group meetings like this to still having them, but having a series of subcommittee meetings that are meeting in the interim. Those subcommittee meetings, as you will see, are on the website with links to the materials they are considering. So we'll do the initial ministerial things like approving the agenda, what have you. Then we'll move right to the public comment period. And we have folks here in the room. We have folks perhaps on the Zoom screen that will get into the queue. And then time permitting, based on a request from the work group at the last meeting to separate out the member comments between meetings versus those that come from the public. And you will see two packets. One is called public comments, and those are people from the community that are directing comments to the work group. And they were getting lost in the shuffle of the work group member comments. And it was creating, I think last time we had about 1,000-page file or something of those. So the better part of valor was to separate out those comments so people can see the public comments more readily and not have to sort through them to find them. So we have two separate packets there. We'll talk about, we had two tours, as you know, one of the neighborhood, one of the landfill facility. There was an opportunity for Q&A. The questions were gathered, put together in a chart, sent out, and staff has given some preliminary thoughts. The neighborhood tour leaders gave some preliminary answers. Republic did the same, and as well as DEQ. So we'll go over that and talk about what we're going to next. There's been talk throughout the last couple of meetings, in particular about what role, when, where, why, and how do the county's Vision 2040 play into the Sustainable Materials Management Plan. So we'll have a discussion about the Vision 2040, and then a discussion from staff about how they fit into the charge. The longest agenda item is going to be hearing from the counties. And those counties that have been invited are Deschutes, Lynn, Lincoln, Marion, Polk, and the Yamhill counties. And there'll be a facilitated discussion with them, with an opportunity for work group interaction with them to talk at a broad level about Charge C, which is the outline for the SMMP and the public education campaign or opportunity that was the last charge in the Board of Commissioners charter. We'll have dinner. My understanding is we're having a Caesar salad, steak Diane, and either your choice of baked Alaska or cherries, some kind of flaming cherry dish. So there'll be, depending on behavior, you get your choice, because the baked Alaska is going to go quickly. Yeah, there you have it. So, and then as this transition meeting is going, we'll report on the various subcommittees. We have landfill size capacity as one. Part of the common understanding is to get together a document that captures all in one place the CUP conditions from the past land use actions and their current status. And then I'll have a presentation on the legal issues that are floating around and the land use review process. And then we'll have a presentation on the work group report of the SMMP. Each of those subcommittees has had a chance to meet one time. I was at all four of those meetings, and they were really nothing short of excellent, both by way of cooperation and collaboration and designing a process to take the materials that staff generated when we first met together and parse them out and vet the information and get it to you in a vetted format for your consideration as to inclusion in the work group's final report. And then we'll have the usual closing dance number with evaluations, next meetings, and what have you. So that's the overview of the agenda and our work plan for today. You received draft meeting 3M3 meeting minutes. Were there any additions, subtractions, corrections to that document? Anyone on Zoom? Just because I only can see some of you, just unmute yourself, and if you're a work group member, and add any additions or subtractions, because I'm not seeing any in the room. Hearing and seeing none, I'll take that as approval of those minutes, and they will be moved forward. We also provided the meeting 3 evaluations. 3 of the members had an opportunity to respond to their comments, which we appreciate. They've been summarized in the usual format and posted on the web. I will ask a question now in anticipation of our ending item. This isn't a criticism of those folks that didn't have time to do it. I'm simply wondering, are these evaluations worth the time and effort to do? And perhaps we take a break in doing the meeting evaluations. So just, I'll ask you just to think about that. And at the end, Millie's going to remind me to say, do we even need them at this point, or maybe do them less frequently? Tuesday, Joel has his hand up. Hey, Joel.
Yeah, I just hello everybody. I just never found a link for the evaluations this time, and I've heard from other people that said the same thing.
It's at the bottom of the agenda of the meeting. So if you scroll down and go to the bottom, and I believe this is the same place last time. It's there. Maybe what we can do is tomorrow morning, send out a separate email with that link. And Millie, who, or Amelia, who works with me, unfortunately for her, even took us to the next level of grooviness by putting some Rorschach ink blot test that apparently you look at and it turns into a meeting evaluation. So that's there for you too. But hopefully that'll help. All right, the Board of Commissioners, and this would be the next document if you pull up, please, the updated work plan. And so the Board of Commissioners met on Tuesday. They initially took up the issue of a different timeline and process structure a week ago Tuesday, where a draft was presented. We received guidance from the board and comments from members of the work group on that. I took that information, updated it, and sent it to the board, and you all received a copy of that and noticed that they were going to be meeting on Tuesday morning to discuss it. And they, in fact, approved that a particular work plan, which you should have in front of you. And apparently we're just having trouble getting it on the screen. But in a nutshell, what it does is it changes the meeting times. So our next meeting was going to be November 3rd, but we are extending the period of time in between the formal work group meetings to create more time for the subcommittees to meet, confer, discuss, vet material, and present it in advance. So please note your calendars with these new dates: November 17th, December 15th, January 19th, and February 23rd. Again, November 17th, December 15th, January 19th, and February 23rd. The target is to get the final report to the group, excuse me, the commissioners by March 3rd. That could flex to the end of March, depending on the various mechanics and schedules, what have you. But that's the new approved work plan. Behind it, the other documents is the subcommittee task by charge element. And those, what I did there is the first column is give it a name and number that corresponds with where it fits in the draft final report of the work group. Summarize the charge associated with it, be it charge A, B, or C. We're standing up D and E after our November meeting. Indicated the subcommittee members and their email addresses. And then at that moment in time, when this was done, provided links to the website where the relevant documents live. Since that time, staff has had a chance to create a website page for each of those 4 subcommittees. So the most relevant information on what a subcommittee is considering and planning to do and has done will be found on those links, which will be part of the packet going out. Danny, you might just tell them briefly where you can find them on the screen.
Yeah, when you go to the main work group webpage, you're going to scroll down and find those 4 links to those 4 subcommittees in there. So yeah, just scroll down past where you connect for each of those regular work group meetings and find the subcommittee.
So that's the new work plan. Any questions, comments, suggestions for improvement? Seeing none in the room. Anyone on the on Zoom? Hearing and seeing none. Thank you for that. Let's now go to the public comment portion. And if you could show me the gallery view of the folks on the screen so I can see how many people to get in the queue. But let me first start off by looking to the audience who's physically present. How many members of the audience would like to give a presentation to the work group? Public comment. So we have 1, 2, 3.
I don't want to duplicate what others say.
Yeah, okay, well, you're free to add perspective. So 1, 2 for sure. So now we look at the screen. We have Debbie Palmer, so that's 3 commentators. We have Kat Scheller, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, so that's 4 folks.
And I think Linda Brewer might want to as well.
And Linda Brewer, am I missing her screen? Oh, I see her.
She sent me.
Oh, there she is. I just saw it flash. So we have 5. So let's do the 3 minutes each presentation. And what I'm going to ask is that the first presenter come up and maybe sit in between here, so you're close to this owl, which is basically the microphone for the group. So why don't you come up, introduce yourself, and take it away. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Doug Pollock. I'm a resident of the Soap Creek Valley. I've been in Corvallis for 36 years. And I've been a neighbor of the landfill for roughly 30 years. I sent an email on October 5th detailing my experiences, both as an engineer working at Hewlett Packard on inkjet cartridges and also waste reduction, product stewardship, and also serving on the Corvallis Eco School Network, which is a group of parents working on solid waste issues and recycling in our schools. I've also been an enthusiastic dumpster diver observer for many decades. And I just wanted to talk briefly about my testimony I delivered in my email. I recounted how HP used to dump their scrap inkjet cartridges from manufacturing in the landfill. That was their standard practice for roughly a decade. And I developed a recycling system at Hewlett Packard that ground those cartridges up, separated the ink for a separate disposal process, but essentially stopped sending cartridges to the landfill. What I didn't mention in my email was that in the first year of operation of our system that I developed there at HP, we processed 200 tons of cartridges with ink. So that's an idea of the volume of material with ink. Roughly half of that was ink going into the landfill prior to that in the early 90s. And so part of my reason for mentioning this is to say, you know, there's this toxic legacy of material that was going in the landfill that was accepted by the regulating agencies at the time with this kind of questionable argument that the cartridges were containers. And the video I took at the time showed that absolutely wasn't the case. When a dozer ran over it and ink sprayed everywhere, it was really obvious that the ink was just not being contained by the cartridges. That prompted a change. From one day to the next, the landfill said no more inkjet cartridges. My experience with the Corvallis School District over 15 years roughly has been a very frustrating, long experience. You know, I've identified time and time again, 5 gallons of containers of paint, you know, fluorescent light tubes, other things that were in the dumpsters that shouldn't have been there. And there has been essentially no will on the part of the superintendent or the school board to have any substantive efforts to address the issues I've raised. It's their final response essentially was to put locks on all the dumpsters so that I and other people couldn't see what was going in there. These efforts came up again this last year as I found more fluorescent tubes in a dumpster at Crescent Valley High School, 3 different incidents, and I documented them. I reported them to DEQ, which was in itself quite a long, tedious process trying to find out how to fill it out, trying to get a response. I had to follow up to a number of times, talk to manager to try to get a response. And the response I got was frankly quite dismissive. It was, you know, we followed up and they promised us it won't happen again and blah, 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 the usual stuff. And so part of my, and I'm not even mentioning the hundreds, thousands of items of perfectly useful things, chalkboards, desks, file cabinets, scientific instruments that I found in the dumpsters through the years that I've documented. So just focusing on those items that are regulatory violations, I think in my mind, there's a clear trail of evidence that there have been repeated violations for decades of material going into the landfill. And there's just been a complete lack of willingness from my observations to deal with it. I've had calls to Republic and Allied Waste in the past trying to get things to be done. And, you know, even just to put labels on dumpsters to remind people what should or shouldn't go in there, no, they would absolutely would not do it. I've tried to get extra dumpsters put at the schools for metals and other things, pallets separated out. And there's just a complete failure of will. I've hit this wall at every step of the way. The sustainability coordinator for the Corral School District recently quit because he ran into frustrations. You know, when Lincoln School was torn down, he had a complete container load of chairs he wanted to get reused. And the person in charge of facilities in the district overrules him and had them crushed and sent to the landfill. He had someone who wanted to take them, and she overruled and had them crushed and sent to the landfill. So I guess part of my interest in being here is to say that there are enormous opportunities to reduce waste that's going into the landfill. There just hasn't been political will. And I also believe there's really strong evidence there have been violations that probably the operator and the public and the regulators have very little idea of a lot of the stuff going in the landfill, short of having some kind of regular audits, detailed audits to see what's actually going in there. I'd also like to say, I think this process, without criticizing any of you, they're part of it. It's a fraud. It's a very difficult process for the general public to get engaged in. You know, people work normal schedules. They can't attend meetings like this. I think a lot of neighbors out there, some of whom you hear from today, have put a great deal of effort into fighting the expansion of the landfill, and they kind of feel like, why are we having to go through this again? And I'm not getting into the details of the process, but I think these consensus type processes, I've observed them taking part in a number of them through the years, and the thought I'd like to leave you with is they tend to invariably serve the purposes of the people who are in the process insiders, the people who are elected officials, the bureaucrats, the regulators, and they often are used to give a false sense of legitimacy to these processes at the expense of the general public, who are just completely overwhelmed and can't keep up with the details. You know, people, there's just so much detail. Nobody can read all the information and absorb it, let alone come to meetings, testify. And so, you know, there's 4 people I think they're going to testify today, but there's hundreds of people who were speaking out against the expansion of the landfill. And those people are not represented in this process generally. I mean, some of you may be representing their views, but to me, that's a major shortcoming of this process. And again, without detracting from your efforts and your sincerity, I hope you'll recognize that these processes, by their very nature, have a certain, you know, they work to a certain advantage of the people who want consensus, which isn't always the nature of these processes. There may not be consensus.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next up on my list is Mr. James, is it Roddle or Rodell?
Rodell, and can I go later? Because again, I don't want to duplicate.
Sure. No, it's fine, Mr. Rodell. All right, let's see the order here. So the queue, as you may be able to see this on your screens, is Debbie Palmer, Linda Brewer, Pat Schwartz, and Kat Newscheller, and Elizabeth Dale. So Debbie Palmer, you're up.
Hi there. Before I started speaking, I just wanted to let you know there are a couple people in the chat that also want to comment. I'm not sure if they've been identified. So
Thanks,
please.
I'll look at that.
Okay. All right. Now I will begin. Hello, work group members. My name is Debbie Palmer, and I am a resident of Benton County. I want to speak to you today about the landfill and the climate crisis. The first point I want to make, though, is that your facilitator, Sam Imperati, has been misrepresenting the community's point of view regarding the landfill, and we need him to stop doing that. He keeps trying to paint us as wanting to close the landfill as soon as possible. This is not true. We just want it to stop expanding. We want the operators to go ahead and use the permitted space they already have, and then when that's full, close it and revegetate it as described on their own website's FAQ page. And then we want the county to take that time, 10, 15 years, to plan for post-closure waste management. This work group is undertaking the very beginnings of that with charge 3B, scoping the necessary tasks to start a long-term solid materials management plan. So that part's good. The second point I want to make is this, something you may not know. There are intentionally sited landfills and accidental ones. Intentionally sited landfills are in dry climates and remote from human habitation and water tables. Dry climate, because the wetter the landfill, the greater the methane and leachate production. Remote from human habitation and water tables is self-explanatory. Republic Services has an intentional landfill just across the Columbia River in Washington, the Roosevelt landfill. It gets less than 8.5 inches of rain a year. It is underlain by over 300 feet of solid clay with 1,500 feet separation from the bottom of the landfill to the closest regional aquifer. And it is in a county with a population of less than 300 people. Compare that to the Coffin Butte landfill in Benton County, which has a population of over 92,000 and averages 58 inches of rainfall per year. But back to my point, Coffin Butte landfill is an accidentally sited landfill, an accident of World War II in Camp Adair. It was never intended to be long-term, never designed to get this huge. But unless we put a stop to it, this landfill will continue to expand ad infinitum because Republic Services profits handsomely from landfilling garbage, not from trying to keep it out of the landfill. So they don't ever want this gravy train to end. Anyway, bottom line is, I believe we all want the same thing. We all want to do something to combat the climate crisis. Did you know that landfills are just below the oil and gas industry as top greenhouse gas emitters? And we want a better plan for the future of solid waste management in Benton County. I believe that was the original intention of the Trash Talk work group, not to come up with a plan, but to engage in the process that would lead to that plan. And I also believe that that is the primary reason most of you applied to be in this work group in the first place. I hope you will keep these facts in mind as you make your way through this work group process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Debbie. Linda Brewer, you're up next.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to turn my camera on. Yes, there I am. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Linda Brewer. I'm a 35-year resident of Benton County and a professional soil scientist. I want to have my comments entered into the meeting record, and my comments are based only on evidence and personal experience. So I am I have been in the past more than 10 years a member of the Solid Waste Advisory Council. During that time, I have reviewed water quality test reports from infiltrate collected from under Coffin Butte landfill and analyzed by Tuppen Consultants, LLC. I found the data in the reports to be thorough, well organized, and credible. In my opinion, Republic Services is doing a commendable job of managing a landfill in a very difficult climate regime. I'd like to point out to all present that Republic Services is a for-profit company, and so they can justifiably expect to profit from their activities in Benton County. Finally, during my time on the Solid Waste Advisory Council, I was aware that the trash rates for the residents of Benton County have been held artificially low, and always work to introduce that, to rectify that. People have no reason to hold the trash back when they're getting too great a deal. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Next up is Pat Schwartz.
Okay, can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to thank all the members of the work group and support their efforts to develop a comprehensive waste plan for our community. But I want to echo kind of what, you know, the woman before me said too. We can't do it without our business community, and Republic is one of the most important members of our business community when we talk about this landfill. I'm happy to see that Republic is at the table and willing to work with us as we figure out our solid waste needs for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kat Newsheller, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, hold on. There we go. Okay, can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kat Newsheller. I've lived in the Soap Creek Valley for 30 years. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I've testified on this subject before and written many letters. As far as I can see, the situation and the facts are pretty much the same. The only difference is that Republic Services is now trying to take a different tact on to get the same thing, which is pretty much the right to take in as much waste as they can for as long as they can to maximize profit at the expense of the health of the environment of Benton County and the outlying counties. I know they're a for-profit corporation. They are worth $42.5 billion. So yeah, they need to make money, but not at the expense of our health. The Planning Commission said no once, and I don't see any reason why that decision should change because nothing else has. They took the Republic took the closure of Soap Creek Road off the table in their appeal, but it wasn't theirs to close in the first place, so that baffles me. And if the county gives them the power to expand, they're going to lose that last bit of control that we have over them, and they know it. That's what they want, or they want. All you have to do is reread all the previous testimony and the emails that were sent to you, and you'll see the facts, which the neighbors had to gather up amazingly with, no time or money to do it like Republic has. So I just see the strategy of these big corporations is to wear people out, hope they give up. They have the money and the lawyers to go on forever. But we just have the facts that they can't dispute. They never could. And we had to work our butts off for free to research those things. And they have lied. I'll say it. They have lied before about their noise levels or capacity issues, et cetera, and they'll continue to do this until they get what they want. The more garbage they get in, the more money they make. So there's no incentive for them not to take in more garbage. I mean, the headline on their website is devoted to the community. I just find that amusing since they're not really listening to us. So, I mean, I can already see so dramatically increased traffic on 99 from all sorts of reasons, but if they start shipping in garbage from all over, they're already doing that. We're going to have more traffic and more accidents. We already had one neighbor killed on that by our trailer turning into the landfill. When I drive 99, I always get junk on my windshield wipers from the trucks going down with uncovered loads, and the road is filthy all the time, no matter how much they clean it. And I remember they used to charge, I think they required you to have covered loads. And now they don't do that anymore. So that also baffles me. I can smell the dump when I go past it. I can hear their trucks backing up. So if they're so devoted to us, why don't they listen to us? And why do they continue to fight us all the time? I just don't understand why the county hasn't sought better ways to deal with garbage like a lot of other counties in Oregon have already. And I know the county needs the money, but it's such a minuscule amount considering what they're doing. And once they leave, we have to deal with all the mess that they leave. They don't. Okay, they won't be part of our community anymore. So we just have to start looking at the future instead of the short-term gain. So anyway. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And Dale, if you could mute your microphone, that'd be great because we're getting feedback. Thanks so very much. And then if you could open up the chat so I know who to call on.
Dale's next and then Pat.
Who's the first one? Dale?
Yes, hi.
Hi, please, you're up.
Thank you so much for letting me make my comment. And I just wanted to say that recently I am a Soap Creek resident for 25 years. Recently, I was at the landfill with trash, and and was using the recycling for metal, and noticed that perhaps we were the only ones. Other people were dumping their metal in the trash and also their furniture. And I'm wondering, with all the money that Coffin Butte is making, could they not have a monitor or two to help direct people with their recycling? And it would help the community very much if that furniture were offered to the furniture share and help people who are in need in the county. I know that many trucks from other counties come to the Coffin Butte landfill, and perhaps there could be some monitoring or sorting that they would do before they dumped their trash. Perhaps they could put their metals in a certain area and their toxic stuff, and that all could be sorted before it came to the Coffin Butte landfill. That would be a big help to the community. And I know that Coffin Butte is interested in the community, and I don't think having a couple of monitors monitoring where the trash goes and how it can be redirected would be too much of a cost if they're making that much money. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pat?
Yeah, so my name is Pat Hare. I'm the city manager of Adair Village. I've been there 13 years. And I was also spent 3 years on the Benton County 2040. And I have many relationships with public service. And I think, Dale, I just want to say to her comments, I appreciated your comments because I felt like you were looking at creating relationships to better the process rather than downplaying the importance of Republic Service. Republic Service has been an amazing partner to the city of Adair Village. My entire council supports Republic Service. We lease a large chunk of land and we're the closest city in proximity to Republic Service. We've created programs with them and the Benton County Sheriffs where we're picking up trash on Camp Adair, picking up garbage on 99, and they've been receptive to all of those. The other part that I think people are missing is they're one of our largest employers, not just one of our largest employers, but they also keep garbage out of our backyards. And what I want to say to that is, if we start raising rates, every time you see a rate increase to garbage disposal, you start seeing more garbage in our forests and our green space. And usually that garbage ends up near the landfill where they went to dump it in the first place. And there's a lot of studies that show that. So I think we need to be very careful here. The other thing is this is a land use decision that Republic has decided to give the public this opportunity to speak out. They did not have to. I'm sorry, as a city manager, I would have appealed to the commissioners right away. This property is zoned landfill. It's just a conditional use to look at. And again, they are partnering. We're questioning Republic Service when they're not just a regional leader, but a national leader in recycling, composting, and waste management. When I want to get legal advice, I talk to my lawyer. If I want to get waste management advice, I call Julie Jackson. So I think we're missing some pieces here that aren't being said. And the other thing is I've sat in public meetings and on the 2040 and on other committees my whole life. And what I've seen is the motivated are the ones that are here talking to you. And so when we say we're not representing our community, we're not talking to our community, no, the 70 people is controlling our decisions rather than the other 90-some thousand people in the county that are not at this meeting that support Republic Service. A lot of jobs, a lot of impacts are because of Republic Service. And before Republic Service, when we had Allied, when we had Valley Landfill, our waste management was nowhere near, it was a backup and dump into the dirt. And now we've got cells, we've got leachate disposal. I worked with Republic Service for 3 years on their leachate, and they have to maintain that for 50 years after the landfill closes. Again, they know these things. And the leachate is now in cells. They dispose of it. They were working with us on treating it. So they take this stuff very seriously. I've also sat on committees with Republic Service where they're looking at innovative and creative ways to dispose of waste. So I just want to say from a Dare Village's standpoint and from my personal experiences in all of this, I support Republic Service, and I hope that we don't get in the way of ourselves here, because if we start having to ship garbage to Washington, we're going to start seeing garbage in our backyards. I'll tell you that. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you guys spending your time on this committee.
Thank you. Sir, would you like to comment now? I think we're done with the comments so far. So if you'd like your shot, just please come up and sit and introduce yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm James Brodell. I've lived in the area for 16 years, but not near the landfill. I don't know enough about the details. All year I've been working on trying to do what I can to help save our democracy. But I do hear things about the landfill that sounds like certain agreements have been broken. I don't know that. It's just what I've heard and read. If that's the case, even if it's not the case, I would like to know if the county commissioners would be willing to engage some kind of auditor who could be respected by all parties to go through and hear from people who have said there have been certain conditions in the agreements that were broken, could go through and analyze all that, come up with what's true and what's not. Also, I would love to see an audit of the enabling documents that were created and by whom they were created and by whom they were signed, to find out if there are any tangible penalties for breaking agreements. If not, what's the point of having an agreement? I mean, it's like certain people that don't appreciate the rule of law. So I guess this is probably not the venue to be bringing this out. I probably should have saved this for the next meeting of the Board of Commissioners. I apologize to you if I'm wasting your time, but please consider this, and maybe there could be a transparency group of volunteers and officials to look at the kinds of improvements you're talking about here that you guys are probably going to enable some good ideas. That would be great. But it would be good to have a transparency that reaches out to the public. Let them know through some means or other about what's really happening with that landfill. And I appreciate what the man said from the Dare Village. If Republic is truly taking care of the leachates and all of those other issues, God bless them. Let's let the folks know that too. Let's just get truth out, transparency. I guess I've taken enough of your time. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. All right. That concludes the public comment period, the oral public comment period. In your packets, there is a separate packet for the public, meaning not folks who are not members of the particular our work group, and then member comments, which were the highlights of the emails that work group members sent to me or staff or the Benton County Talks Trash website there. What I am encouraging the subcommittees to do with those sets of comments is if there are comments in them, in those written documents that that you think are relevant to your charge in one of the subcommittees, to take that up and put it on the agenda and consider it during the subcommittee meetings. But I will open it up to see if there's any work group member comments or suggestions for improving the processing of the comments that come from the public and your colleagues. And so if you, pardon me?
Just a quick correction, we didn't end up printing any of the member or public comment documents just because they were each going to be like 70 pages long, and that was a lot of trees to kill. So they are on the website, you can look at them online, they're just not printed in front of you.
And so on the agenda, there's a link to them. I should have made that clear. So there's a link to those files, and it was the sustainability consideration to get those forward. Yeah, Ed.
One thing, going through comments, I can see some disconnects. And I was thinking of having been to a common understanding of the history of Coffin View and where things are. And I believe that was on the work list early on, but I don't have a document to grab and refer to say this happened then.
So the short answer to that question is several members of the work group have submitted drafts of those documents. Staff initially started to create, and they have a draft of that document. The work group writing the executive summary for our final report and this history piece, we're going to kick off after our November 17th meeting. And in fact, there will be a history of Coffin Butte based on the subcommittee vetting and your vetting. That will be part of the final report, which can be part of the public education campaign that goes forward to anyone that's interested in that. What has not been worked out is the tenor and scope of that document and what should be included and what not should be included. But Dan, do you remember where those history pieces are living now? Is it in the member contribution section of the website?
So the folks outside of the staff contribution who have submitted any documents relating to history, those are in the member contribution section of the main work group webpage. Staff contributions are also loaded on there, but they're unfortunately buried, I think, in meeting 1 or meeting 2. So I'll pull those out and make them more accessible to folks.
Could we see what the staff has gotten to so far? The reason I'm saying this is because some of the questions, there seem to be disconnects because we're not using the same terminology. We don't have a common understanding of what happens when. So if you get something that can just start moving us on with that.
Sure, yeah.
Just point to where it might be. It can wait until the end of November, but give us something that kind of get a framework from right now.
So what we can do is we will send out, Daniel or I or Amelia here will send to you all of the history documents by the links to them. So you can find them readily. So you can get this email and you can see and go to with various parts of the website where they list and then review them. There's been many different approaches. So in a nutshell, some of the comments are a summary of the newspaper articles that have mentioned the Coffin Butte landfill over the past X number of years. Some of them have been a chronological history by volumes and size. And so there's this overlap to the capacity subcommittee, and that there's that treatment of the history. The current status of the CUP conditions also appears in chronological order, and there is that. Some of the information that we received involves evaluation of the statements asserted in those history pieces. And I'm not sure they're going to rise to the level of a common understanding because there's not going to be agreement between the diversity of the viewpoints here as to whether X is a fact or an opinion. So where I will be facilitating towards are very fact-based sans opinions, chronological history that focuses on a specific theme or two that does not include all the technical data, like here's how many cubic yards that came in. There'll be a separate table for that sort of thing. And then that may be combined with the history of the CUP conditions. As you know, because you're on that subcommittee, that then at some point could be merged into some omnibus piece. But right now they're separate.
I'm looking for a lot less detail.
Yes.
Something that says, the burn pit was over here. The part of the landfill that was in operation from 1977 to mid-90s was over here. That's called the old landfill. That distinguishes it from the burn pit, which is a 40s activity, and then a cleanup in the 2000s, like 2020. And to give you a specific, there's a question that was asked, and the folks responded appropriately, but they answered it it was asked about the old landfill, which is like 44 acres and is on the south side of Lane, Coffin Butte Road. And it seems to be answered for an old burn pit, which was associated with Camp Abbott, which is on the other side of the quarry. So we're just talking past each other.
Right.
I'm just looking for something really simple that helps people not talk past each other.
Noble goal on the work plan. And it sounds like, the county has an opening for an historian position. And I will sign a letter of recommendation, and I think everyone around this table would co-sign it.
I'm not 100 yet.
Yeah. Okay, next up is Marge.
I think that it would be really helpful when we talk about things like old landfill or burn pit, that we establish what cell are we talking about? Because that all the landfill areas are demarcated on a map as various cells. And it would be really helpful if we could draw a direct correlation of what are we talking about with this is this place right on the map.
And I think it also benefits from a glossary of key terms of what these things mean, because Ed, as usual, is absolutely correct. The nomenclature various people use for the same thing is different, and then that adds to the confusion. So for if you come on as a 0.75 FTE, you can get paid to do the glossary as well. Yeah. But wait, there's more. You also get no. All right. So let's move on to the tour questions. We got the answers that I said. That is also a huge document. There was no expectation that anyone had an opportunity to review that. It is a 45-page document. So just for history and background, during and after the two tours, there was an opportunity for the people on the tour to send in questions. Everyone sent in their questions. They got rolled up into one big document and put into the table that looks generally like the thing in front of you. Did they have this or not this? Okay, you have that. I'm seeing the head.
No, anything over like 10 pages.
Okay, so the link is there on the website. And could you show just the front page of that, Inga, please? It's anyway, while she's pulling that up. So basically, excuse me? Oh, Joel, thank you for your heads up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, this document, if you could please split this into two different tables, one for the landfill tour and one for the neighborhood tour. And the reason for that is that the questions that came from the landfill tour Republic had a chance to answer those. There was never really a request for the neighborhood tour leaders to answer those. So it's somewhat misleading to have a whole empty column under neighborhood tour leaders on that. And also, I think if you take that column out of the landfill tour, you would actually have an easier to read document. It would just, reduce one column and you could have shorter pages. So that's a request. And then as far as, and actually at this point, if we did want the neighborhood tour leaders to respond, there's only really one neighborhood tour leader who's still involved. The other one got axed this last week. And that would be me, and I don't have time to actually respond to all those. So yeah, if you could please split those into 2 different sections so that it represents what's actually been done, I appreciate that.
Are just to help refresh my memory here, I don't know if this is you, Amelia, or you, Daniel, but these questions are the first X number of them from the Republic tour and the ones second half from the other two, from the neighborhood tour?
The first 23, I believe, are from the landfill tour, and 24 and on are from the neighborhood tour, I believe.
Okay, so, we can, at least on this core document, look at making it clear which questions go to whom. There are comments by Republic and the neighborhood tour leaders that do provide information on a cross tour basis, not a lot of them, but there is some. But ultimately, one purpose of this document may well be, depending on what the work group wants, is to create a FAQ, frequently asked questions document that is put together. And it may well be that the best order for an FAQ is by topic, regardless if the question came up at landfill tour or the neighborhood tour. And because usually frequently asked questions are, bundled together that way. So it's a consideration that we can look at going forward. It is not my intent to tee up a task for you all now to edit and get consensus on these frequently, or these tour questions. The county agreed to have 2 tours. There was an opportunity to ask questions. They were answered by both DEQ, the neighborhood tour leaders, and Republic. They are there for your information. Again, like the public comments, to the extent the subcommittee members see something in those questions and answers that they believe can and or should be brought forward to their substantive work in the charge, full speed ahead, go for it. But the going on and trying to refine this beyond that is just not within our time frame and scope and work plan.
Sam, I think you missed my point, and there's still some misleading information here. There was not a cross tour chance to respond in both directions. That only happened on the neighborhood tour, where there were some questions addressed to the Republic services, and they have appropriately answered those. The case was not the same in the other direction. So that's why I'm just asking you quite simply to just split these into 2 separate tables so that it doesn't imply that the neighborhood tour leaders somehow missed a chance to comment. Thank you.
Okay, we will see what we can do for that. Here is my understanding of what happened. All the questions went out to everyone at the same time. And the neighborhood tour leaders responded first. And so it is true that DEQ and Republic had the benefit of seeing what the neighborhood tour folks said when they put together their answers. I think we will do our best to make a note, and maybe it's by removing a column in one place or the other, that indicates that the neighborhood tour leaders did not have a time to respond, or weren't given the opportunity to, is more fair, to respond to Oregon DEQ and Republic. I'll ask Daniel, when these were sent out, did the neighborhood tour leaders have time to respond to the staff answers to these questions? Were they part of the packet that initially went out?
I'm not sure. We loaded, yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, we'll find out and we'll put the appropriate notations so there isn't creating the appearance that folks didn't have time. Excuse me, so the appearance they didn't have time or didn't want to rebut it. But it's everyone's answers are their own answers, and you can take what you want with that. Marge.
Oh, I just want to say, Sam, that it just seems to me that it'd be real easy to do what Joe passed.
Yeah, I think we can do it. I just don't know mechanically if we're gonna do, so, and we can take it out here. There are some places where the neighborhood tour leaders did respond, but I don't know where they began.
Starting questions were 24, I believe, or yeah, 24 actually. Neighborhood tour from the neighborhood tour that.
So it's
Okay.
just making two spreadsheets.
Yeah, I can clarify. I have it on my computer, and we responded, Nancy Whitcomb and I responded to in a completely separate document. We only send in replies to the neighborhood tour questions.
Okay, and we'll make that clear. All right, anything else on the tour questions and answers? All right, so we're a little behind, but that's fine. We can make time up. The in the last couple of meetings, we talked about the SMMP values and goals discussion and the Vision 2040. And we're lucky enough to have a work group member who is very involved in that process. And he has put together a PowerPoint presentation to give us all a common understanding of the background of how that looks. And I don't know if you want to do it from there, come up here, whatever is the best. Inga will put it on the screen. And if you could gesticulate wildly during the presentation, that I find is very helpful to people.
You guys going? I'm Sean. I'm the guy that sits over here. I'm a sustainability coordinator, and we'll get into it. Greg and I facilitated at the time. I was in community development. Greg was my supervisor, and so we facilitated the 2040 Thriving Communities Initiative. So what I will do is kind of walk you through. I know the whole thing is. And so I stopped right there. Kind of walk you through what the core values you've been hearing about, these community core values, but they're in a esoteric way. So I want to make sure you all know exactly where it came from and what it is. So sustainability. Benton County has a very long and rich history of adopting sustainability. Greg was here before I was. Starting back in the late 90s, we had a sustainability policy identified and created in 2002. There were two sustainability coordinators before I arrived in 2015, who were part-time. One is still with us. Adam Sevens is now Natural Areas and Parks. This is what we think of in terms of sustainability. It is that typical union of equity, environment, and economy. Plus, here we add livability. Again, every sustainability coordinator has somewhere tattooed on their body that Venn diagram we've always seen. But as any topic matures, it kind of, livability is creeped up. As you see in Seattle, San Francisco, increased housing prices has made it really tough in these wonderful communities because Corvallis has no idea what high cost of living is like. So we include that in there. So what we did, we have to go back to, I started in 2015. And one of my big charges was to go out to the community. What does sustainability mean? And what are some of the challenges that this county will be having? So at the time, PSU, Portland State University, has estimated that we'll have 20,000 more people here in Benton County by 2040. The Pacific Northwest is mapped out to be a model to be the only major region to have immigrants coming in because of climate change. Everyone else is moving out. We're already seeing that. And so what are we going to do with increased population, infrastructure, demographic changes, land use changes? We also have the environmental effects of carrying capacity. Our sizes are going to change. What are we going to do with these increased people? And then also, this is on the hub of a few county-wide initiatives that weren't perceived as having enough public engagement. And so that was another issue that we really wanted to make sure that we created and involved in our community. So what we did, and the charge was, how do we capture the core values of our community? And so the commissioners said very clear, they didn't want to be a part of it. The commissioners identified 20 local leaders. You see Paul from Strengthening Communities, the back of Vince Adams and Peggy Lynch's head. These are, you know, all 20 of them, or at least some of them. So they were the ones that really guided it. I facilitated, we staffed it. We had a handful of public county staff that supported the endeavor, but they met every month. That started in May of 2016. By the August, September, we started to go out to the community. And so this was a really impactful, how do we get these core values and what do they mean? And so it's very important. This was not a plan. This was not your traditional checkbox kind of thing. This was something on principle, something on how to change the process. And it was incredibly one of the best experiences of my life to be part of that. So it was to build those trust and relationships, especially reach out to the voices that we don't often hear, the just usual suspects that you always get in any school, and hey, come on out, here's your bagel, here's your sticky note, and let's go have fun. We went out to them. And the big one was focus on long-term solutions to complex problems. And we're going to end with that. So that was the intent. That's not how every community does it. You'll see a lot of more like, hey, what's your future plan? And you hear this 2040 plan. Sorry, spoiler alert, there's no plan. It's a process. So what did we do? We went out to our communities and asked 3 very simple questions. What do you like and value about living in Benton County? What do you want Benton County to be like between now and 2040? And how do we get there? That second question is pretty important because so often is, hey, what do you want 2040 to look like? Because, you know, between now and December 31st of 2039, nothing's going to happen. Like, we're still dealing with things like why you're all here. And so it's an important thing to how do we keep getting on a path to get us there. So those are the questions. Now, how do we ask the questions? We had 5 major outreach efforts. This was multifaceted, 2-phase, 2 stages. First, public events. This was at the fairgrounds. This handsome devil, who is our city manager in the Dare Village, you've already heard from today, who was on the 2040 council. Public events, county fairs, company salute over at Osborne, all kinds of different ones, online surveys, listening sessions were key. We went out to 60 community organizations, sat down with them in their house, in their meetings, and asked them those questions. That was a dialogue. The Magic Corvallis, they had their own outreach effort, and then community plans, maybe Greg can be a little more succinct on this, but basically Alpine, Belmont, and all the unincorporated communities in Benton County have a very similar plan, so we incorporated that. Bottom line is we had 10,000 comments from 4,500 people. Again, this was a 2-stage effort. First stage, we created our core values. They identified the core values. Then we went out into the public again to really make sure we got it right. And it actually, we got one wrong, and they changed the especially diverse economy that fits. And so we went out again, and that was what adopted. So in 2018, we had these core values. To be clear, we have 5 core values predicated on the foundation of health and equity. So my favorite 2-word question is so far. So what do we do with that? So Joe Kirby, our county administrator, we led, we'll get into the second. What was the question of how do we operationalize these core values? Those values are on, we distributed them. Thank you, March. These are kind of amorphous. These are more principles, ideologies. It's very difficult for any government organization who is much more focused on implementation. How do you do that? Okay. So what we did was Joe convened an internal group to identify how do we operationalize our goals, our initiatives, our activities, and most importantly, our budgets. And that is, we'll kind of loop in. So the first one was to translate those core values to what we call focus areas. These are the 10 focus areas that we came up with that we found opportunities for each of our departments to actively and proactively address. Kind of a gateway drug between the core values and how we can do it, how we can positively affect what we're doing. Okay. Now we can get into the meeting. I just want to set the stage. So now we're going to get into how do we really go day to day. So this is our famous, some infamous pyramid. In my 3 decades of work, it's always impressive to me. Should it be a pyramid? Should it be up and down? Should the air go this way? Greg's laughing because we have parallelograms, whatever you want to talk about. It all comes down to the geometric shape. So this is our lovely Benton County pyramid. Basically, the thought is these are core values. They are our endposts. Focus areas and vision statements, as each focus area does have a vision statement, kind of organizes us on how we as an organization internally can get to there and how we can proactively address those. Then we get into our goals, which are those every 1 to 2 years, again, kind of marching down the field. But this also goes all the way down to our goals. This is cubicle to commissioner. It's not just the commissioners, each and every one of us has a proactive way to do it. So what I want to kind of focus on is internally, some of the ways that this is operationalized inside. So one is a BOC checklist. As we all know, Darren left, Greg and Inga, we all know, what we have is a checklist, Commissioner Wise is left. Anytime we present, we have to fill out this thing. What are the salient issues? What are the third rails? What are the budgetary impacts? All those things you would probably imagine we would have to do. However, also included in there are all the focus areas and core values. And so we have to explain how do they affect that? Like, why does this matter? So maybe it goes with the wildfire plan. This is going to affect community resiliency for you, but I'm sure you have to do that when you present. This is how it affects the core value. This is how it affects the focus area. And it's a two-way street. One, it's getting staff understanding. It's not your shoelaces, it's where you walk into. And it helps our staff to understand why we're doing this. I also will get into this. It's just to give commissioners and Joe an idea of how we're kind of marching down that field. And we'll get into some of the limitations. So that's a checklist. The next. Another way is our budgets. I, as a policy analyst, let's be honest, budgets are a moral document. If it's not part of your budget, I'll meet you at block 15 because it's not really worth our time. So what we did was part of the ISC, Joe, the last biennium, directs our leadership. Each and every one of them has to identify 3 to 5 goals, department goals that address that as part of the budget. Joe sent that out last week. Darren and Greg had to do it before. Every director has to do this. And so that's how it gets really kind of embedded into our organization, how these long-term goals are applied. So, and that progress is tracked by the massive staff of one. Okay, so what I want to kind of do is get into, as we start talking about a management plan, to know what it is and what it may not be, and then we'll get into questions. You know, I want to be clear when we submit our core value or checklists and these things. I've never seen this, and I doubt it. It's not like the commissioners up there. Okay, you scored a 2 on economy, but only a 7 on this, so it's 9. You didn't hit 18. You don't have a management plan. It's not like some criteria based, or if you don't do so much, you don't have a state county fair. It's more of groups like this or planning. I had a great conversation with Darren and Greg. How do we plan for the future? And I encourage this group, very similar, in our subcommittee. Danny, you said Metro is a great example of a sustainable management plan. Went there, that's exactly, it's almost verbatim with these core values. On the front page, they're talking equity, economic development opportunities. Cradle to grave, I would challenge you to go cradle to cradle. Those kinds of long-term fits perfectly into what this visioning aspect is. And so that's why when we start talking about what our communities value, how do we get to 2040, how do we make sure that these processes are going in the right direction? That gives you the background of what we're talking about. So before we dive into the plan, that was only what, 8 years in 6 minutes? You're so welcome. Questions before we go any further? I doubt most of you have much experience with this. So either did a great job or crap. Yes.
Well, I guess I would wonder, what is the process? Like, I just was noticing that in county projects, like in looking through the Board of Commissioners packets, that with county projects, there is always a list of core values. And then there's some kind of measurement. And so if you say, okay, that serves as a lens, do we define that a little bit?
There's a few ways that we're doing that I track on. So what I can do is break down a pot of dip. I can track from my team all the initiatives and actions, and every time we present on supportive communities, like how is Benton County and all of our stuff doing, all of our activities doing to address supportive people and communities, or how we're doing it with the economy, or how we're doing with food and agriculture. It starts to be a lens on how we are as a collective organization moving forward. That is one aspect. Again, it's not necessarily we haven't achieved something. We don't really have a goal necessarily to one, but it is giving us a lens and insight on how we are all collectively moving and collaboratively moving in a common direction.
So with respect to this process, can you talk a little bit about how the core values fit into this process?
I think this is a great process. To be looking at where do we want to be in 2040, to like how the materials from the very beginning to the very end, looking at it as a holistic, and we talk about, and correct me, Daniel, you want to talk about climate, by the time it gets to at the end of the life cycle, it's already 1% or something like that. How do we start from the beginning, and how do we recognize and celebrate these opportunities across the entire spectrum? Economic development opportunities, equity issues, health issues, as a management plan, as a materials plan, as a whole, and to start, again, respecting each and every one of those, and not just look at the very end or a specific point in that spectrum. So that's why Joe asked me to be here. That's how I think it matches very well with the principles of 2040 and what we're working.
All right, thank you very much. Daniel, anything to add or comment on? Or?
No, not at all. Thank you, Sean.
If you could just put up that one document, I'll just set a little bit more context in response.
I forgot, I was supposed to say. One thing I did not say, I apologize for speaking last second. It's been a very intense week. I finished this 20 minutes before you all met. Someone helped with language and was slacking off. I do apologize with all of those. The only reason it's not in your package, so I apologize for that.
Yeah, we'll work on adding it to the webpage. So everyone has access to it.
Just in time product delivery. Right? Okay. So I just want to show you this one document that's in your packet. It's called SMMP values and goals, and hopefully that'll open up. It's not opening up.
No, it's not. I'm sharing.
So in a nutshell, we're scoping the SMMP, as we all know. You'll hear a subcommittee report after dinner about where they are in that process and what their next steps are. Usually, in looking at the jurisdictions that have done SMMPs recently, Daniel found that usually in the first 1, 2, or 3 chapters, they have a chapter on their vision or their values or their goals. The work that Sean just presented, it has always been and will continue to be for the subcommittee to make a recommendation to you to put in the final report, to what extent, if any, and how will those core values be considered in the scoping of the SMMP? So I would suspect that the subcommittee is going to make a recommendation to you that looks something like before you start the SMMP or as part of that initial process, we recommend that the consultant who will be doing this work with the community to develop their vision and values and goals. And we recommend that you start with the 2040 document as part of that process. But the next step down of saying, as a result of value, 37, that therefore that means we should do this or that is not how the document's used, as he said. It's a framework for discussion. So if you can just go back to I got something in my throat. So what I'm suggesting here, and the subcommittee will do it, is the SMRP subcommittee will consider all that information, which is what he just said. And if acceptable to the full work group, the recommendation could be something like the following information be used to establish vision, values, and goals for subsequent formal SMMP process. And our scope does not include prioritizing or editing this below information. And it's beyond just 2040. So now if you can scroll down, we actually have state goals. And I asked you, Dan, if you could talk to the, you went a little bit, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of detail just to keep this simple, but essentially there are state and county goals that address certain elements of waste generation as well as climate elements and greenhouse gas emissions goals. So these are sort of the sources of those goals that you can learn more about, but taking these state and county goals that already exist on the periphery of this topic would be an important element here.
So these were just put it in one place. The key documents that we know of, the subcommittee will say, yeah, well, we need to add ORS chapter something else, or another goal statement from the state and the other goal statements from the county. So this is trying to get them all in one place to give guidance. And this may just appear as part of the RFP for the consultant who's going to do the SMMP, ASAP, LMNP, and to say, make sure you consider those factors. So any questions, comments about how that fits in, Marge?
Okay, so here we're saying that we want to apply these goals to the future SMMP, which is visualizing the future. And I guess my question is, and I'm not trying to be difficult, but my question is how shouldn't we also apply those core values to the question of expanding a landfill in our county? Or is that just not part of what we're doing?
So the potential place that fits in our current charge is charge B, which is a discussion of the processes and procedures surrounding a future CUP application. And that topic would fit there. So we will raise that question, the question of raising the question with that subcommittee and have that vetted first there to be brought back to the work. Because one of the
subcommittee, this would be the CUP subcommittee.
no, this is going to be, it's actually yes, it's charge B, which is the CUP subcommittee. It may also have a place in the legal subcommittee as well. But yeah, I mean, asking the question, but see, we can make recommendations as to proposed process changes to the thing, but we can't then say something like, if we were to apply the Vision 2040, that by definition means there's no possible expansion because it violates the sustainability prong of this issue. So as long as it stays at a process level, and then the board decides what it decides.
Are you saying then that we could say this should be looked at in concert with the CUP?
So the work group could make a recommendation that says to the board, we, the work group, believe that when you are making CUP decisions, you should look to vision, what's the formal name of it? 2040. You can make that recommendation to them, and then they will decide if that's what they want to do or not.
Can we put that on the calendar?
Oh, it's going to be out on the next subcommittee meeting agenda. That issue will be teed up. Whether we resolve it or not at that point is another question, but it'll certainly be teed up, and Amelia's taking notes. Otherwise, my brain would not possibly remember to do it.
In the next meeting.
Next subcommittee meeting, and then we'll see what they're going to report out next. All right, so moving on, we have some guests with us, so if you can let us see the gallery. And the other counties, our neighbors and colleagues, if you are on the Zoom call, if you could show us your smiling face and unmute yourself, and we'll have everyone introduce themselves. And then Daniel's gonna talk a little bit and facilitate. He can do it from where he's sitting, or he can come up and take my chair while I get a head start on the Caesar salad that will be coming shortly. So why don't we start off with Daniel, why don't you just facilitate this portion of the meeting?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll do it from here, so I have easy access to my computer. So in between meetings, I've reached out to several different counties to join us and be able to speak to some of the topics that we're covering in the work group charge, namely charge C, covering the sustainable materials management plan, and charge E, public education, with the work group around these topics. And I've sent folks that you're seeing on the screen now some of the materials, namely the table of contents that we started compiling and sharing jurisdictions kind of topics that they've covered in their plans. And one of the main things that I was hoping to hear from our neighboring counties is their thoughts on some of these topics. And then also some of the experiences that they've had with the planning process around solid waste management or sustainable materials management, as well as really any other kind of more specific thoughts or guidance around the Benton County's planning process for these. So I guess we can all introduce ourselves first. Paul, if you want to introduce yourself, you're first on our screen.
Hello, Paul Seitz from Lincoln County. Heading west of you here down at the coast, and it's been a bright sunny day, so I decided not to drive in. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Paul. And next we have Chad.
Good afternoon. Chad Santola, Director of Solid Waste for Deschutes County, and we did a rather substantial solid waste management plan a few years ago, so hopefully that experience will get some valuable information we can share with you guys.
Thank you, Chad. Next we have Christina.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. I've been having issues with my microphone. My name is Christina Tisdale. I'm from Polk County.
Thank you, Christina. We also have Shane on. who is a work group member.
Hello, Shane Sanderson here from Lynn County.
And then obviously we have Brian in the room, and I'm not sure if anybody else from Marion County is joining in.
I just have Andrew Mallett.
Excellent. Well, I guess if we can open it up first to, if you've had a chance to look at this drafted table of contents, we started piecing together some of the key topics that have been covered in other folks' plans. What are your thoughts on these topics, and if there's anything that stands out as particularly important to include in the planning process or to include in solid waste management plan or sustaining materials management plan? And I'll open it up to anybody who wants to speak to that.
So I'm a little bit of a disadvantage. I'm looking through emails that I got from you, Daniel, and I see this Benton County Talks Trash workgroup charter and bylaws. I'm trying to find an attachment that has a table of contents in it, and I'm not seeing that.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. I'll re-forward it. And you know, we don't actually have to dive into the specifics of the table of contents too, because you know everyone here is also kind of considering planning in the roles that you have as part of interacting with solid waste from your county's perspective. And if you have any thoughts on the planning process or aspects that we should be considering as board group, kind of diving into scoping sustainable materials management planning, any thoughts, feedback, or lessons learned that we might be able to take away?
So this is Sam Imprati, the facilitator, and I was going to ask our friend from Deschutes County who has done this process recently, you know, looking back with the clarity of 2020 hindsight and just looking at the process of developing it, not the content of the actual document. What were some of the lessons learned or suggestions? Because our scope right now, our charge right now is just to scope this. I mean, you know, should we do this internally or externally? Who needs to be at the table beside those that live in the county? You know, what's the timeline like? You know, what kind of consultant should we, or consultants should we be looking at? As more so than make sure you include consideration of an incinerator and a transfer station. We're not at that level of detail.
Yeah, so one of the things that comes to mind immediately was the public engagement process was really important. Now, our county, we operate with a solid waste advisory committee for special projects like developing a solid waste management plan. So the complexion of that committee included representatives from each of the incorporated cities, representatives from the 2 franchise haulers that are in Deschutes County, a few professionals that have experience somewhat related to things in solid waste. There was a representative from a local trucking company. Then there were 4 or 5 citizens at large that were involved with it. I'll be happy to share the solicitation we generated for the project with Daniel after the meeting. I can dig it out of our files here. But the public engagement process is really important. That the SWAC meetings were public meetings. They weren't so well attended initially, but as this gained momentum, there were a few more people involved. And towards the end, we had an open house that was very well attended by interested members of the community. So that was a critical part of it. As far as who does the work, there are a number of firms that have a lot of good experience doing solid waste management planning. It was a very competitive process for hiring the firm that we ended up working with on it. And I think the key thing for us was having a pretty well-defined scope of work with them once we embarked on negotiations with them. Overall, it was a good experience. Took a long time. The process, as I recall, ran more than a year with monthly meetings with the advisory committee, and it was very well received by the county commissioners. Everyone seems to blame everything on COVID these days. We had our feet in the starting blocks to start rolling out on some of the recommendations when the pandemic hit, and we had to put a lot of things on hold for that. But we're kind of picking up where we left off in the past 6 or 8 months or so to get back on track with program implementations.
How about from the other counties? Any insights on the processes and procedures to go into such Herculean endeavor?
This is Paul from Lincoln County. I don't have perspective from Lincoln County, but in the 90s, I was an employee in the solid waste district, Washington County Solid Waste District. And we have 2 landfills, one which closed, and we had an active SWAC process, Solid Waste Advisory Committee process as well. Same exact comments as Chad. That interaction is just priceless, getting involved with the community. I've been through that post-closure and the need and want of keeping a landfill and those interactions that you have with the community. So I can answer questions to that from the 90s, but I don't have anything from Lincoln County other than our selfish want of, hey, you're my local landfill there. I'm interested in what you're talking about.
Great. Who's our other?
Yeah, we have Christina, we have Brian, and we have Shane.
Okay. So let's take our guest on Zoom and then go over to Brian and then go to Shane. Christina, you're on mute. She mentioned she was having trouble with her system earlier, so why don't we give her a second to do that, and let's go to our resident.
Appreciate that.
Dr. May.
Yeah, thank you very much. So again, kind of echoing a little bit of what Chad was saying, Marion County's been through that process, but not recently. Our last plan was updated in 2009. Some of the information mentioned in here is just additional reports where we brought consultants in to vet out certain things or certain portions of our solid waste system. I think the important part is understanding the length of time. Chad mentioned, it took kind of the better part of a year between scoping and an RFP process and then getting to a final document. It was over 2 years for Marion County from kind of start to finish by engaging into a consultant. That was great for staff level because they were helping carry the ball, lead the charge, and definitely that outreach portion where we reached out into different jurisdictions. We've got 20 incorporated cities within Marion County, population of in excess of 350,000. So trying to reach out, take time to reach each and every person is pretty difficult in that kind of outreach program. We also use our SWAM app, we call it, but we use that and subcommittees of that to engage in that process and allow public engagement through it. And as Chad said, as you get to the finish, you get more and more people that want to participate because now there's something to actually respond to and engage with. But it's a great process.
So a couple of questions. Oh, go finish.
And I think for us, we try to update our about every 10 to 15 years we're due for an update. But the solid waste industry's changed so much in the last 5 years. DEQ has their 2050 vision, which is really kind of switching us away from that core just value recycling to more of the life cycle analysis, the full loop, not cradle to grave, cradle to cradle. And I think that's a big shift. So not talking just solid waste management plan, but sustainable management, and it's the kind of that approach to try to address all those needs. And it's not just where do you dump it at the end, it's how you avoid dumping it anywhere.
So just based on your past history, a couple hypothetical questions just to get the general sense. Let's say on January 2nd, the Board of Commissioners of Benton County said, yep, we're gonna launch an SMMP process and what have you. Staff, go forth and create an RFP, for the outside folks and get your, to the extent you have a public involvement person on that, to when you hired them. What generally, how many months does that take? Is that?
I'd say if I was speaking from a
Yeah.
American standpoint, you're probably at least 3 months.
Okay, so 3 months to do that, and then there's the interviewing those consultants and then negotiating a contract, includes a scope, roughly, and then they have to sign the contract, and how long for that phase?
So typically, we're incorporating the scope within our RFP process, so it's
Upfront.
basically a great scale outline of this is our expectation. This is what you.
So they're bidding on the scope.
Yeah, now there'll be some variance and some collaboration.
We're fine tuning, right? So then that contract gets signed.
Yep.
And we're at about what month now?
4-ish.
4-ish.
Yep.
And then, what are the sort of next big chunks of big events and chunks of time to get to the finish line?
I think it's again, it's back, now you have your scoping in place, it's not how you developing the outreach plan, which is a lot of the information that should have been provided in that RFP process, but that's what you're trying to engage that consultant in. What's going to be your approach?
Right.
To this, and that's what you're creating on the evaluation and what do you want to see from it. I think initially you start out with, just like Chad said, it's key stakeholders, whether that's the city council members, different jurisdictions, franchise holders. We had 8 franchise holders within our group. We have material recovery. We have 2 material recovery facilities. So you're bringing in your solid waste professionals, and then you're also bringing in those other stakeholders.
Okay, so the franchise holders were participants in the SMMP?
So our advisor, our SWAC, sits with kind of 8 industry members and then 8 people at large. So we kind of have that representation
Already.
at the tables. Yeah. So we would bring others in.
Okay, and then roughly how many meetings were they monthly?
We met it monthly. We have a standard monthly meeting for our format. If there was a need for a subcommittee to dive into things deeper, we would assign that task.
Okay. And then ultimately, when it was handed to the board, just kind of Board of Commissioners, at roughly, you say, is that 2 or 3 years?
It was roughly, and I would say probably about the 18-month mark.
18.
So as part of that, as you're going through the scoping and kind of your table of contents, pieces are being developed and drafted and kind of walked through for us for our small map approval, and then those pieces were actually walked to the board in a work session, so they were completely aware of what was culminating to what would be more of a finished document. So in the final draft per se was about forward, they had been kind of in step.
How many public events roughly did you, open house kind of thing?
I believe there were 4.
Okay, and were there any surveys done in addition to the open house?
Oh my gosh, now you're talking way back.
No, if you
yeah.
don't. But
Today we would definitely be doing
some surveys, and I promise to get to Catherine next. And how much more successful do you anticipate Benton County will be than Marion County on this project? Like twice as successful, 3 times. You don't need to add this to joke. Yeah, Catherine.
Well, I'm actually an excellent office, and I have to add to your question.
Yeah, so I was going to come back to him and then see if Christina was able to solve the audio problem there.
But that was not my question.
Oh, you had something else too. Okay, you're multitasking. So go first and then we got you.
Well, this is changing the topic a little bit from the planning part, but I'm curious, you want the plan obviously to be a useful document. So I'm curious, as I assume it's something that you theoretically will reference over time. It sounds like not everyone on this call was actually part of the planning part of it. What parts of the document do you see now that you use a lot, that you update a lot? What kind of things maybe sounded really nice to have in there, but you actually never refer to that, don't necessarily need to be in there? Or maybe what kind of things are in there, but are maybe immediately outdated, you know, a year or two down the road, so just, yeah, and maybe, yeah, what are the kind of things you see yourself using the most?
Okay, so I promise to get that answered. That's a great question and good feedback for us. Let's just wrap up the process piece and then go to that next. Trust me, I'm a lawyer.
Sam, can I clarify too?
Yeah.
Some folks that we've invited don't necessarily use plans or have current plans. And they've been invited also to provide perspectives, just from jurisdictionally, what sort of planning elements, you know, could be useful, just kind of tackling solid waste issues for their jurisdiction, but not all of them are navigating from the perspective of having a plan or having gone through the plan.
Great, so we'll tie those two things together. And so, I can't see that.
We have
Paul, do you have any extra credit on the process piece before we shift to the substance?
On the process piece, I think not to underestimate, just to reiterate what was said, but the Recycling Modernization Act comes from DEQ should be a front and center piece of your group as you discuss this. And the problem that you're going to run into with this is the Recycling Modernization Act won't come into its life of its own inertia until about 2024. So if this takes you a little time to get there, I just want to throw out there for you that that may not be a bad thing as you come together with how the Recycling Modernization Act comes together. Just tossing that in for your process.
Thank you. Christina, were you able to fix that audio problem? Looks like not. So you just, that's fine. Chad, anything else to add?
I want to mirror what Paul said. I wouldn't say the DEQ plagiarized us, but our solid waste management plan in a lot of respects aligns very well with what's coming with the Recycling Modernization Act. We have a bit of a lack of multifamily recycling as an example, and that's one of the big focuses that we're seeing in the RMA. One of the point I wanted to make, at least for Deschutes County, one of the development of the solid waste management plan was driven by a number of factors, and one of the more substantial ones for us is the fact that our landfill is going to be reaching capacity in late 2029. So the solid waste management plan was kind of integral to set the stage for the path where we've been on for about a year and a half now on trying to find a new landfill in the county. So there was a few different motivations for us besides the fact that we do need to up our game on recycling and diversion.
Right.
And one other point that was brought up, it was the composition of the solid waste advisory committee. And I just remembered as Paul was talking that the composition of our solid waste advisory committee is specified in county code. So having the franchise haulers, for example, at that table is part of the mandate there.
Great. Let's turn over to Brian for a minute and talk a little bit about, since your name has been used in vain appropriately, on the work you guys are doing. Maybe give us a 1 minute primer on that, how this fits in from your perspective.
Sure. Well, there was, I think it was last legislative session that passed the Recycling Modernization and Pollution Reduction Act, and that will bring producers to the table. So, you know, the people that make the cups, that make the garbage are now going to have a seat at the table and have to pay into the system. So it'll be a shared system where ratepayers will still share some of the costs as well as the producers. So we're in a rulemaking process right now. And as Paul said, 2024, 2025 is when this will start rolling out. What we will be doing here early next year is coming around doing a needs assessment. So we'll be coming to communities and saying, what do you need? You need roll carts, you need trucks. What cities in Benton County right now, if you're a city over 4,000, you have to provide the opportunity to recycle under Oregon law. But there's a lot of unincorporated areas or cities that under state law don't have to, but we'll have funding to get those programs going. So I would definitely think it should be part of the planning process.
Great. So I'll open it up to our colleagues, both in the room and the former Brian and those. The question from one of our members, Catherine, tying in with Daniel, which is, let's switch down to the substantive piece. And are there, sections of that you, in hindsight, realize may not have been as necessary? Are there sections that you now realize probably should have been more robust and more work goes on? What do you do with adaptive management so that you get into it with the best predictions as possible, and then situations change and those topics need to be added or modified or refined or updated, and then from your county's perspectives, topics and issues you would like to see Benton County consider. So I'll just take, you can answer all of those questions. Some of those questions, or answer different questions because you're our guest. So take it away, and whoever would like to go first can raise their hand or unmute themselves and take it away. We can do rock, paper, scissors.
I would just add one.
Please.
One thing, I mean, Sean mentioned the PSC study with the population growth. I mean, we're seeing a lot of multifamily housing coming in, and that typically is very poor infrastructure for recycling systems. So incorporating that into your plan, how are you going to address new housing types for recycling, which is something to consider. Codes or zoning, well, we don't have room for the recycling. We don't have the garbage dumpsters, something like that.
So it floats into other regulations and policies of the jurisdiction, not just, let's just look at solid waste. This ripples through all the other activity.
3-story building, already put that into the building code.
And that's another piece being covered by the second water. Yes.
Great. So who's up first? Our guest. Yes, take it away.
Working on, okay, got it. Two things. One, you just triggered a quick thought, and that is your planning and what codes you have in planning are terribly important to what you have in solid waste. And your plans should have common grounds where routes can cross over between the two, between your county planning department and city planning folk, as well as the solid waste folk. So just wanted to reiterate that. Two things you may want to consider though from past thoughts is that solid waste is a transportation issue. And if you're looking at 10-year plans, post closures, how things are going to move, how things Lincoln County are going to bring you, it's a transportation question for you in your future. And you may want to include that in your plan because transportation is also changing. The way we use gas, the way we use vehicles, the way we use our roads, rails, that all comes into play in your planning. And lastly, I just want to throw out that Juneau is something here Georgia Pacific is experimenting with. Now, it is in direct contrast to what you folks are doing, but it is a plant which is taking in material, processing it out as a recycling. I'm not making any claims of what their recycling rate really is or anything else, just simply saying there is a Georgia Pacific experiment here that you also may want to pay attention to in your process in planning that's in Lincoln County. That's garbage coming to us, it's turned around and sent back to you in the landfill. But in that process, they're taking out quite a bit of water and quite a bit of other materials, fibers for their mill.
That's the one in Toledo? Yeah.
That is correct.
Thanks.
Just to reinforce what Paul just said about transportation, he's absolutely right about that. One of the areas we also focused on, again, part of the solid waste management plan being driven by our closure of our landfill coming up in a few years, was looking at alternative technologies, kind of builds on what Paul was talking about with that facility that he just mentioned there. So there's a lot of emerging technologies out there. we made the conscious choice that we would not be a guinea pig for anybody. If we were going to consider technologies, it had to be something that was established and up operating somewhere in the United States. One of the things we have as part of the ongoing management of the solid waste management plan is every few years we take a look at technology review. We just completed one last year, and there are some technologies that are maturing a bit more, but we're not quite there yet with it. Again, transportation technology are two important aspects of taking a look at both waste management as well as diversion technologies.
Thank you. What about you, Brian? Any substantive topics and what have you?
Yeah, no, I piggyback with Chad saying, before our management plan is, it's kind of that snapshot of the current conditions and what's coming in your future. It's kind of that forward thought as to what you look for. Kind of along Catherine's line is ours it was interesting because we were in a situation not where we're running a landfill space, but we're going to have coming up against a contract renewal with our incinerator. Was that going to be our future? Were we going to look at other alternatives? So they did explore other emerging technologies and different changes and different things, and then also push recycle rates and change happening there. How would we address the entire integrated solid waste system?
Let me open it up to any questions or comments from the work group members for our guests, both here in their county representation capacity, and for those who are present. If you just tilt up your card, I'll know to call on you in the order I see you, and we'll do it and take care of it that way. So up first in the queue is Louisa.
Well, I just thought of a question. When you made your new plans, how did that affect the community as far as what cost or changes in what they were doing with their at home with their garbage and such? How did that change things for people?
So impacts on folks, and maybe this is also referred to perhaps rates, the impact on rates and benefit cost. And so do you guys do rate analyses and benefit cost analyses as part of the SMMP? And then Paul, go with you first.
So I'm going to again give you information that's from the 1990s, and I apologize. I suggest that you contact Washington County for what I'm about ready to say. But to that question, Metro came in and required MRFs at all of our transfer station sites and at the landfill that we had there in Hillsborough. And those have a significant impact on cost. I'm sorry, a MRF is a material recovery facility, for those who didn't know. And so that would be a processor that typically you bring construction and demolition debris across at a landfill, and you sort out all the metals and other things before it gets stuck in the landfill. And that had a significant increase in rates along with other things that were occurring at the time, but the MRFs were a component of that. Just want to throw that in it because you had a person talking about that earlier in your presentations.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. John from OSU.
Yeah, so how much did you RFPs include suggestions or recommendations for policy? County or municipal policy towards anything specific or at a broader level land use, or could it
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? It was a little bit garbled.
Was there any inclusion of or not in the RFPs to wanting policy recommendations out of?
We did not include any kind of policy analysis as part of our solid waste management plan effort.
Okay. Joel?
Yeah, I was really interested in the Juneau facility, and I just want to mention, I think that would be a really interesting thing. Brian may have brought this up in side conversations, and I think it'd be really interesting for us to see a presentation on that. But my question for this group, I was also interested in the multifamily housing issue. How successful were you in getting renters engaged in the sustainable materials management process, or rent groups that represent renters as a part of the society? Because that's a really big group in Benton County.
Before folks contribute to that, I just want to let you know, I think Christina has to leave right at 5 p.m. and I just want to say thank you for being here. If you do have to leave, but since she can't speak up, I wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Christina. So the question, as I understood it, was how do you get those in the rental community focused on recycling and sustainability efforts? And was there a component, more specifically, was there a component of your plan that spoke to that issue? The advantages, disadvantages, the mechanics, the cost, what have you?
The mechanics are a real challenge, being able to provide the space for containers for the recycling. During the solid waste management plan, we did do some surveys. Somebody mentioned surveys earlier in the discussion here. And although we didn't differentiate between a homeowner versus a renter in a multifamily unit, people did recognize the lack of access to some recycling in some areas of the county. And the limited curbside recycling that we have available. And one of the things we attempted to do, and I step back a little bit on the discussion here about rates. At the beginning of this year, we were in negotiations with one of our franchise haulers to add some curbside recycling in Sun River, one of the resort communities here, as well as an unincorporated area of the county. And just this was right when the latest turn of the economy was starting to rear its head, and our commissioners were very reluctant to impose additional fees on residents, although I felt we had a very good proposal from our franchise hauler to add the service. And it's been put on a back burner just because of the current economic situation. So I digress slightly from Joel's question there, but I wanted to bring that point up when somebody was mentioning rates a few minutes ago.
Thank you. Brian.
On Joel's question about multifamily, I mean, that's been a tough nut to crack for the last 10, 20 years. How do you get successful recycling, with the transit community? It's also an equity issue. So I think it should definitely be part of your plan. And, the transportation piece, if you are moving material out of the county, is it by rail, is it by truck, are your collection trucks CNG, are they electric? So I think this plan has potential to touch other parts of the county or other sustainability goals that you're trying to do. To me, it'd be really key to get the cities on board. I mean, people are who make the garbage, and most of the people live in the cities. So they're not on board with the plan. How successful is your plan? And then just a question for Brian or any other county folks, do you have the plan? Is it more just a roadmap or a guide, or is there enforceability or consequences to implement it? Does that make any sense? So
all right, Sean.
Yeah, enforceability, I don't think the county wants to become the waste police out there. Going back to early in my career in California, when the state of California passed AB 939, which was one of their more substantial waste diversion mandates, dealing with the multifamily homes, what we ended up having to do within the city that I worked for had to work with our building department to put into the building code space requirements for waste and recycling containers. I'm not going to throw developers under the bus, but things like that take up either income space from there for renters or parking spaces that are a challenge when you have a lot of development going on with code requiring a certain amount of parking spaces. I think to affect good opportunities for recycling in multifamily homes, you have to accommodate the requirements for having that space available, and that means working with your local building authorities. We were pretty successful with it in California because they had some pretty heavy hammer implications on failure to comply. Oregon takes a little bit different approach on it. But that's one of the things that we identified in our solid waste management plan was that we will probably require us working with all the building authorities within Deschutes County to get something uniform across the board for that.
Thank you. Let's look to Sean McGuire.
As a policy analyst and economist by trade, you kind of hit on a couple times about my experience has been chicken and egg. They won't build something because there's no demand because there's no services, and especially with nursing and these others. And I was curious, as part of your plans, and maybe see there weren't like specific policy recommendations, or their thoughts on how do we incentivize or incubate or whatever verb we want to change the system and not just either make it the existing better or worse.
Thank you.
Is your
So-
question related to multifamily or is it just general?
No, I'm sorry, turning back to where we were before, not multifamily, no, I was like immersed, like that, I mean, if every county had an ordinance requiring deconstruction of any residential, commercial, and that's required, that to me, supply and demand, would be immersed would be popping up left and right, but if it's not there, so just that kind of chicken and egg kind of thing, I see this as an opportunity to at least address it, if it's not necessarily a whole recommendation.
Yeah, I think we're going with that policy and I guess within our management plan is those are maybe recommendations that we evaluate how we would do that. And that would be something that would be taken from staff, the commissioner to develop on not taking in the time to write it in their management plan.
Versus Metro, like made an ordinance and required.
And that's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm trying to push the envelope,
But not excited of that.
Right.
All right, we're gonna wrap up with Daniel, who is our local guru on this subject for any closing comments and next steps, and then we'll thank our participants, and the rest of us will have a steak dinner.
I just had a quick question that I'm gonna try to squeeze in, and it incorporates the idea of the sustainable materials management planning as opposed to solid waste management planning and understanding the implications of that. And I just had a question for everyone really, how understanding that the materials end of life phase is generating about 1% of the emissions associated with that material. How do we shift that focus and try to address the 99% of emissions associated with the full life cycle, the cradle to cradle aspect of these materials, while also understanding that a big part of the planning list is that disposal piece, end of life phase. I'm not sure if there's a good question, a good answer, but I wanted to raise that question, especially since the sustainable materials management planning process specifically, as opposed to just planning for end of life.
And you'll get the Nobel Prize if you can answer this question.
I think the county's policy, purchasing policies, I mean, it's again, you're trying to turn the ship that for years we've been focused on the N5. And that's still an important piece. I think it's maybe a little more than 1%, but there's just so many goods and services being pumped out there that to try to have Benton County try to change that, I think that's a big lift. And not to say that we shouldn't go for it, but I think it would be some policies that might set, so. And education.
Yes, Brian.
I agree. You get two things. You can't not pick the trash up the curb. You can't forget that. That's the first thing people are going to notice is it doesn't go away. You can't have a bigger problem. The way we're tackling it is education and outreach. So we're actually in the process of rebranding our master recyclers to something other than master recyclers because we want to get that full cycle analysis. So we're trying to go through the school. We're going through our C&D construction and demolition recovery facility. We're putting height focus on that. We've engaged in the last 3 months with different entities on their policies. And so what we just talked about Portland and deconstruction is how do we drive those things and move those policies to our board for approval to mandate some of those things part of the system so that we can generate less in the long run.
Great. Well, thank you to our guest. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, what happened? Oh, Darren, you had something?
Hey, thank you, Sam, and thanks, everybody. I just wanted to, I apologize, I had to step away, but I wanted to thank our guests, and I want to extend a big thank you on behalf of the Board of Commissioners for our other county partners who have joined us and are helping in this effort. It really means a lot to our board to have your voices and your expertise and your willingness to share that with us is super helpful. So thank you to the work group. Thank you to our county partners. And as you get ready to enjoy dinner, I'm supposed to let you know that you can make fajitas, nachos, or a salad, but there will be no steak.
Hey, Paul, you got the last word here, buddy.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm interrupting your food here, so I'm going to go fast. And it's to answer Daniel's question. It's a little esoteric, but I apologize for that, but it's the actual answer. When you get everyone in your county, when your board, all your departments, everyone has an element of what you want in there for sustainability, you will achieve that goal a lot further along. So I just want to throw that in there because it's not just solid waste. You can't think of it as solid waste. I appreciate the comments about master recyclers and all those other things. It is how do we move forward as a whole entity smarter? Sorry for the pontification there.
No problem. Again, thank you all. Thank you, work group. And we will send you my DoorDash account number and PIN code so you guys can all order. Thanks so much. Take care. We'll reconvene at 20 minutes to 6. And so on your market set, manja, eat.
Absorbing it. The conversation is more exciting over here, so yeah.
I mean, I asked the question. It was so funny. It's not you guys.
30-second warning, folks. 30-second warning. And wait till you see what's for dessert. Oh.
It's a little bit more than what meets the eye. Yeah. A big cup of good conversation.
Absolutely, a gallon of good.
Daniel's Italy presentation.
All right, folks, it is 5:46. Thank you for getting back from dinner. Obviously, you are free to eat and participate as we go along. As I indicated at the beginning of the meeting, we have 4 subcommittee presentations. Each is designed to give you an update as to their inaugural meeting, which happened either on Monday or Tuesday of this week. And they moved my hood a foot to the left and were able to put together 1 or 2 page summaries of the progress they made and the work plan for going forward. And so after they present, then there will be an opportunity for a conversation between the subcommittee and the work group to, make sure we dial in on the specific questions or asks that we're hoping for the subcommittee to vet and move forward. I do see mechanically the owl at the end of the room has a red light on it. And I don't know if that's supposed to be red or supposed to be a different color. Usually green means go and red doesn't, but this is the opposite.
I just don't want to see me now.
So Christopher blinded the owl, which is
The owls are disconnected.
which is an
We're going
endangered
through-
species.
We're going through the computer right now.
Violation, buddy.
The owl isn't showing up.
And so are we, they're not connected?
No, let's unplug. Okay.
All right, so Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Not coming through the owl. Yeah. I think.
So we're having a little technical difficulty here, and we'll see if.
Yeah. If, yeah. So that one pairs with this one. I'm not sure what the pairing situation will do, but we'll see.
Well, I think they're supposed, both, this has nothing to do with anything. So they're both going into.
Yeah.
That's encouraging. And that, now you each are supposed to say trick or treat, and then you give them a chance to respond. If anyone on the call can hear us, if you could just raise your hand or put a thumbs up in the screen so we know if this is working.
Sam, we can hear you just fine, but we can't see the video, and now it looks like it's loading. Yep, you're good.
All right. Thank you everyone for your patience. So the subcommittee spokespeople for this meeting. Let's start off with landfill size, capacity, longevity. So who is going to be presenting for those groups, and what documents would you like us to have on the screen?
Sam, I think Ken Eckler was going to start for our group, and then I'll follow up with anyone else.
Great. Ken, oh, you're invisible. And did you want us to show that 1 or 2 page report on the screen, or you prefer to just do it as you are?
I have a document, a PDF document to walk through that I sent to Daniel earlier today.
Okay, and would you like that on the screen, Ken?
Yeah, I'd like to have that on the screen. Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
so let's they're looking for that right now, and it'll be you'll have the floor.
No, I didn't queue it up. So I just forwarded it to you.
It should be in the packets though.
No, it's a different.
I think this is a different one that Ken is presenting that we have.
Yeah. I just kind of made that document of Daniel's more presentation friendly.
Okay. Sorry, Ken. I was already down here at 2, so I didn't quite see it.
There we go. Great.
All right, Ken, introduce yourself, even though everyone knows you, but just formally, and then take it away.
Hi, I'm Ken Eklund, and I'm a member of the subcommittee A1 about landfill size, capacity, and life. And I've been the one designated to a resident of Benton County. I'm the one who is going to just be giving you the report about our first meeting. So subjects that we want to cover, one are, what is the charge for this subcommittee? And here it is, a chronological history of key Coffin Butte landfill topics. We're taking topics A, B, and C. So size, which is capacity, otherwise known as permitted airspace plus trash already in place. Specific locations, i.e. where is it? And then the assumptions, the main one of which is when will the landfill close, which is indeed something of interest to everyone. So next page there, Daniel. Okay, here are the subcommittee members. Then next we have the chronological history. So we have a draft document of this. It really focuses kind of on the early days of the landfill. It really doesn't have much about the recent history of the landfill. And it's also kind of lacking contextual history. It kind of focuses on the landfill and not about the landfill as, the landfill doesn't exist in a vacuum. So, information about the context of which the landfill is in. And it's lacking information which is kind of graphically presented, like timelines. So, like in 1982, there was 18 years left of landfill life, for example. I mean, you can really kind of graph that out to see how the landfill has evolved over time. We have some supplemental documents which have been provided to the subcommittee, primarily by other committee members, that kind of help address some of these lacks and also bring up some other items. We haven't yet, kind of collided, crashed those documents into the draft that we have. So that's a task that's ahead. Okay, next, please. Okay, so data gathering, kind of looking at landfill site and operations. So this is kind of answering more straightforward questions. And I've got some examples for you of kind of where we've gotten so far. What's the area currently available? It's 178 acres. That includes the area being quarried. It's only on the north side of Coffin Butte Road. We are looking into, is the landfill contractually obligated with its franchisee to let them exhaust the quarry? The answer is not yes, that's kind of what we know. So it's yes, but, or no, and, or something like that. So we'll have a follow-up on that sort of question. Another question been asked, can Republic members share company landfill planning information with us? The answer to that is yes. So next slide, please. Okay, so kind of in a more general vein, I mean, what are the conditions that Republic considers acceptable? So for example, tonnage cap, is that acceptable to Republic to continue? Geographic restrictions, i.e. can the landfill be restricted from accepting garbage from someplace? That is not acceptable. And then there are other questions which are going to emerge from the process. So next slide. Next page. Okay, so these are the questions we are exploring. The main one is, when will the landfill close? Now, you may think that this is a simple question answer. How big is the landfill? How quickly is stuff coming in? That's when it'll close. But it actually has many layers. There are many layers to that onion. So the main questions are, what are the factors that determine when the landfill will close? What are the likely ranges of those factors? Because they're hard to know exactly. And what are the assumptions that underlie the estimates of those ranges to those factors? And so some of those factors, some of the factors include, obviously, what is the permitted airspace that's remaining? What's the rate of garbage coming in? What is quarrying doing in terms of creating more airspace? There's settlement to landfill, so stuff which has been emplaced, essentially off gas. It turns into gas, which then leaks out of the landfill, and that creates more room. And then there are other external factors. Obviously, there's market shifts. There are questions about pricing. How does that influence volumes coming in? There's environmental legislation. If there are other disasters, if there are like disasters with the landfill, that obviously would affect essentially its ability to operate, and so on. So next slide. So let's see. I think you went up to the top. Oh, no, there we go. Thank you. So there are some frameworks, and this is what we talked about quite a bit in our first meeting. What are the frameworks, the kind of conceptual frameworks you can use to better understand the landfill's future. So the first one I'll mention is the kind of came up was just the idea of immutable versus mutable factors. You know, on the one hand, there are biochemical reactions going on inside the landfill, and those are very predictable because there's, you know, they're going to happen kind of no matter what. There's very little human there's very little human question about what they can do essentially. That process is just going to proceed according kind of to the laws of nature. On the other extreme, you go to something like pricing. Something is like pricing can be changed very quickly, very easily, you know, and so that would be a very mutable factor, whereas the previous one, you know, like the biochemical process or the facts that rock takes up space, I mean, those are very immutable factors. So reimagining the factors, right now there are kind of some assumptions. This has to do with assumptions. Assumptions built in that garbage is garbage that goes into the landfill, where, you know, you can reimagine it as it's fuel for a waste, you know, to energy facility, or, you know, it can be recycled or repurposed, et cetera. So that's a conceptual framework that we talked about. There's the degree of future discount. Future discount is an economic term just having to do with how much do you value the future as opposed to today. So if you have a very strong future discount, you're really taking care of the future. If you have a very low future, I mean, a very high future discount means that you are not really taking care of the future. So I think I kind of garbled that up, sorry. And then we also, it brought up, we want to play out future scenarios. You know, again, this is kind of bringing in external factors, kind of like I mentioned before. And so all of the above, you know, these sort of conceptual frameworks are a way to reveal the underlying assumptions to the statements about the factors relevant to lifespan. So, so let's go to the next slide. So there are just some questions which have come up, which are kind of uncharged, which are very much related to when will the landfill close. You know, one is, can cell 6, the quarry area, be prepared for use when cell 5 is full? Are there ways for quarrying to finish? Are there ways that quarrying can finish up as cell 6 begins? How much airspace is opened up by quarry operations? How does that graph out at time? How quickly or how slowly does that space become available? Could that process be artificially accelerated? And then how does the landfill's current trajectory, i.e. its recent history, inform its future trajectory? So you would think that kind of graphs, if you think about graphs of the landfill moving forward, how much do those graphs, you know, based on what has happened before, inform us about what's happening in the future? Or are those graphs, you know, or is a graph like that not work? Are there external factors? And then the last one, economic drivers. You know, so for example, diverting material out of the waste stream, if there are incentives to do that, or for that matter, you know, the people at the other counties that we were talking to talked about basically the cost of transportation, which is very much a cost, you know, that has to do with material coming to Coffin Butte. So there's an incentive, there's an economic driver for the people who are contributing, the counties that are contributing material for the landfill. There's an economic driver for them to lessen that, you know, to divert material out of that waste stream so they don't have to transport it. So and so that's one example, or those are a couple examples of the economic drivers. You know, what others are there? Next. So we also have documents and are looking at what other assumptions related to the charge. So, you know, more than just the life of the landfill. What is the environmental cost of the landfill? So kind of what happens as that, as the landfill is filling. And so there's really a lot of these factors. I just mentioned 3 of them here: leachate, methane, traffic, et cetera. Our document has it's a very long list. And then what are the rules that govern the landfill? You know, both what are the past and current, which I think is kind of the focus of another subcommittee, but also working into the short-term future, and particularly for us, you know, what is the landfill like post-closure? So what's the long-term prospect for the landfill? So next slide. So another question just has to do with what risks does a landfill create for the county? And obviously these risks also have to do with the factor, is the landfill going to be able to discharge its the service that it does for the county? You know, in the case of a fire, earthquake, groundwater pollution, or, you know, kind of a concatenating combination of these sorts of risks. So what are those risks is really a question that we're exploring. And then next slide. Yes. And so, you know, the question now is, what other questions? I'm kind of giving you a kind of an overview of the sorts of questions that the subcommittee is already looking at. Are there questions that we're not considering that we should? Are there particular issues that you know about that the subcommittee could explore or should explore? Please give us your ideas. Here's the upcoming meetings, the schedule that we've got. And now let me turn it over to Ginger.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate you putting this together, because obviously I was on a plane and I wasn't able to take the lead on our presentation. I would like Daniel to pull up the report that he had put together following our subcommittee meeting, including the questions to be explored by the subcommittee. And that's because I feel like, and this came up at our subcommittee meeting too, in full disclosure, but I feel like some of the questions that are up here on Ken's slide deck clearly are beyond the scope of what our subcommittee is charged. Our subcommittee is charged with size, specific locations, and assumptions. It is not charged with environmental impacts, methane, like, you know, earthquakes, or any of that. That is not part of what we are supposed to be looking at as a subcommittee. Now, I think it is extremely critical that we examine some of the things that Ken did have in his presentation, because I know we're all interested in that. You know, when will the landfill close? What is the service like? What is the impact of the quarry? Some of these things we already have answers to. For example, we know what the we know that we have a years-long contract with Knife River to excavate the quarry. That is, I have that, you know, that is not in dispute. We also have contractual obligations, hauling and franchise contractual obligations in Benton County and Corvallis and other cities and counties in terms of hauling trash and hauling waste and disposing of it environmentally, safely, responsibly, and all of that. So there is, you know, there are discussions to be had about assumptions. Can we improve overall recycling and diversion rates? Can we do something about the amount of food waste going into the landfill? 20-something% typically, according to the EPA, of what goes to the landfill is organic food waste. Those are valuable conversations to have, and they directly play into site life, and they also play into the long-term sustainable management materials plan. That being said, not all of our contractual obligations are public. Those that are public, that are with municipalities and government agencies, those that are public record, we are happy to talk about those and disclose those. But we have private contractual obligations with other entities that are proprietary, and that is not going to be part of the discussion. It's also very important that this group recognizes that in the 1970s, Coffin View landfill was designated a regional landfill. We don't have to agree with that. We don't have to like it if we don't want to, but that is the reality. It is the designated landfill for Benton and Lynn and Polk and Marion counties in this region of Oregon. And due to those contractual obligations that I mentioned earlier, the reality is we are not going to divert up to 80% of the waste going into Coffin. We are not going to get the tonnage down to 100,000 tons a year, but that it's just not going to happen. So those are not assumptions that are realistic. And I am urging the subcommittee and the work group that as we talk about these things, to stick with assumptions that could have a meaningful impact going forward. Because otherwise we're just wasting our time. And to be honest, time is not on our side. We don't have that much life left in the landfill. And so when we're talking about site life and we're talking about these issues, we really need to be focusing on those that directly speak to what this group is trying to accomplish. So those will be my thoughts.
All right, Ken, a quick response, and then I'll frame this up for questions from the work group or comments from the work group, and we'll move on to the next subcommittee.
Yeah, it just seems to me procedurally that what Ginger has said is she's removing items. I mean, I presented questions which are in front of the subcommittee. I'm not sure that Ginger is given the authority to essentially remove those questions or to say that they have been removed when the subcommittee has definitely not done that. So I just want to note that.
All right, so let me speak to this because Daniel is the staff person supporting this. I am the facilitator of it. I saw Daniel's piece, which is up on the screen now. And I did not see Ken's piece until it was presented on the screen. Therefore, I haven't had an opportunity to compare both documents side by side with the Tuesday board approved work plan, which is the genesis document for the subcommittee charge. I don't think it's going to be a productive use of our time tonight at this meeting now to hammer out what the subcommittee's charge is and is not going forward, because ultimately it's the Board of Commissioners charge that frames up these issues. The one thing I will point out that was part of my presentation on Tuesday to the board was any issues surrounding benefit cost or these risk factors was removed from the overall work group charter charge and is being treated the same way we are scoping the SMMP. So to be clear, or attempt to be clear and blunt, is that we are not going to be doing a benefit cost analysis within the confines of Benton County Talks Trash. What we will be doing is suggesting that there be a benefit cost analysis done, and here are the questions or the framework or the table of contents for them. And then the board can make a decision as to how far it wants to take that analysis and when. But to go in back and forth, because I only have one of these printed out and give you sort of a quick opinion, it's not productive. This will obviously be a first agenda item at our next meeting. Yes, Marge.
Okay, I just have one question. Based on what you just said. Okay, so eventually the landfill will be filled. I mean, there's no question that's going to happen. So what happens to your contracts then?
You want to do some of the contracts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to keep picking up garbage because that's what we do. You know, we're a sustainable partner in our communities, and
at that point in time, based upon where the material will be relocated, you know, at that point in time, we'll assess and determine what the cost associated with that is, and you know, that will be passed on through our process and our reporting with the city.
So any contracts that are outstanding at whatever time the landfill is filled, you will negotiate some other resting place for the waste.
Yes.
All right, Dan, do you have something?
I just had a quick thing. I think as a report out for the subcommittee, I sort of recognize a lot of commentary embedded into kind of both pieces of the presentation. And I really encourage folks to watch as much of the subcommittee meeting as you can and get a sense of what conversations happen. But I think it's hard to hear that report out and think, oh, like what happened at that subcommittee and what sort of conversations went on. But there's a lot of really great dialogue, a lot of really helpful information being shared. And frankly, it was framed as generally questions to be considered in future subcommittee meetings. So that was the main note I had is there's a lot of really great questions coming up in that group. And I'm not sure if it was accurately sort of reflected during the report out today.
All right, Ginger, do you have something else? Your tent is up, or someone's tent is up.
Oh, that was from before.
Okay, no
Sorry.
problem.
I did things and I forget.
Last call. All right, thank you both for that presentation. Next up is Subcommittee A2. They're all getting T-shirts and bumper stickers to proudly wear. I'm a survivor of Subcommittee A2. Past CUP conditions. So who's going to be speaking to us on that? Ed, do you want to do it there or come up here? What's your preference?
Here's fine, so we can just move along.
And do you want any particular document shared on the screen?
Actually, it was part of a handout, so I'm assuming it's in the.
This is
one page from me, Daniel.
Let me try to pull it up. I didn't add one. I've got it here.
We made copies of it. So we all, unfortunately, for the folks though, if we could find it, and for the folks on the computer, they can then see it too, because they obviously don't have a physical copy of it.
This is just reporting on a work product from Johnson Bisco, Mark Yeager, Jeff Condit, Bill Williams, and myself. We met on Monday. These are just some of the highlights. Our goal remains the same. A common understanding of the conditions placed on the landfill and the landfill's compliance with those conditions. We discussed what needs to be added to the draft document because everybody tried to contribute to one previously, so we had something to work with. We decided that we needed to add information from staff reports, get a sense of community issues from those, and needed a timeline showing land use decisions and disposal volume. This is trying to stitch all the stories together a little bit, and we talked about that as a group earlier. We focused on fleshing out a complete list of past land decisions, not just approvals or denials of CUPs, but also other things that might be in there that are guidance, that are instructive of how landfill is supposed to work. And in particular, there was a 2002 memorandum of understanding between the county and Adelaide at that time, I believe it was, which was instructive. So that should get brought into this compendium. That ended up, let's maybe change the title. It's land use files and not just CUPs. And that name may change a little bit, but Ingrid helps craft that name for us. We were struggling with how to present the conditions of approval because the document we have now gives the summary. It says this is what happened. So like in 1977, the landfill was approved. But there was no way to get at under what conditions. we needed some way to get back to that source information. We also recognize that not all files are going to be available, so we need to flag for other people's consumption that this is not available. We're really, there was a gentleman that gave a request for information in the public comments. We're really just following what he asked. So I wish you were on the subcommittee. We agreed to have a spokesperson. I'm the one for today, but that'll change from meeting to meeting. We had some action items. One was being able to get all the records. Those were available from the county FTP site. It expired, either fixed it for us, and we needed an example of what we were all talking about to say, yeah, this is what we want. So I get charged with putting an example together. I think that ended up in your package.
Yes, it should have.
But because that's really getting into the weeds.
Well, it's okay. It looks like this. It's bigger font, bold and underlined.
Yeah. So,
Please.
So this is the one from 1974, of the CP 7401. And the first bold section from the recent document we had, it's got a 4-line statement of what was described in that CPU summary. And then we said, well, maybe we need more. We needed the conditions. So it was easy enough to actually go back. Daniel had put together the list of documents. So I just went back to your list, did a little iPhone magic and imported it into an exact representation of every word that's in that approval. I didn't capture signatures. On the second page, because I always get lost, there's so much stuff here. I get lost from where everything's coming from. So this came from the landfill land use decisions file that Daniel put together. There were supporting documents referenced in the, if you go to the next page, there were supporting documents where I'm talking about the notes section. So there was a map was referenced in the land use decision, but there was no map available. So it's just not there. But also in that, if you now scroll back up the other way, you're going to see some gibberish in one of these. Keep going. Stop. Number 1. MIWSVAEKB. Those could mean anything to anybody, but it also references, this document references the Namekita, if I'm saying it right, regional solid waste plant of 74. So if you go back to that, they give you the definitions of those letters. And those are the letters represent where the landfill was supposed to draw from. And because that's so not very meaningful to me, I added the figure from that drawing. That's the last page. So that gives you a sense of the physical layout or relationships of what the draw area is supposed to be in 1974 or 77 rather. So at that time, the agreement basically stops just north of Salem, just west of Salem, and down to the Benton County line. It's probably overdone, but it was just something to throw out to our subcommittee. Is this what we want to see for tying things together. And we haven't had a chance to talk about that yet, so we'll do that at the next meeting. Now, one of the concerns is it's going to take a lot of space. What's it going to look like? So if you looked at page 4, was putting everything in font that might fit in report. And 2 excerpts. I took out all the names and stuff and just started with the word approved from that 1977 document. And got rid of some of the other frills in the second paragraph. And then add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's what's there. That's what the gentleman was asking about, other than the signatures. And then again, I left the notes are just the trail of problems to find out where the information came from. So we'll find out if that's what folks wanted to try to do. We did say that this, well, at least for me, it was slow because I'm slow at this kind of stuff. So we need to be careful about staff uses, and maybe we can figure out some way to divvy things up or make it easy on Inga.
This is great.
So, Ed, I'm disappointed you just phoned in this report and we're just making stuff up and there's no background, no examples. I guess we'll let you continue on, but yeah, next time up that game. Are you kidding me? This is phenomenal, phenomenal work and great stuff. Inga, you are staffing this particular subcommittee, so I'll give you an opportunity to share anything that you care to share with the work group. So that's great. So Darren and I, as you know, presented Tuesday to the Board of Commissioners, and one of the points that were made that we're in support of lengthening the period of time to complete this process is the reality that staff primarily is going back through volumes and volumes of documents in different formats and trying to bring them together. And so we are creating, in the broadest sense of the term, a history or a background compendium of the key documents and what they mean, and creating that contextual history or timeline, if you will, so that those folks that come after us who are reviewing applications, perhaps doing the SMMP work, don't have to be sent into a room with microfiche and rats and cobwebs to sort through and deal with all this. So it is, as Ed pointed out, a huge lift and undertaking. And we thank the subcommittee folks and thank staff. This one was primarily Inga's lift on creating the document that in its current form is not that large. It's only about, let's see here, it is only 62 pages of conditions and their status and cross references.
I have to say, Daniel actually did it, and I just.
You checked it off. Okay. Well, when is your performance evaluation coming up? I would not have admitted that in this moment. This is something you wait till after the performance evaluation. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you both. Any last call on where that group is going? But it's a big piece, it's a heavy lift. Yes, sir, Brian.
I'm curious, I mean, like how many land use approvals or conditional use approvals?
24, 25, something like that.
Okay.
And then each of those, has the potential of having, conditions. That's why it makes it so.
I mean, speaking for myself, I like the summary. I don't necessarily need to know, who the commissioner was, but that's my 2 cents.
Any other suggestions for the subcommittee, Ginger?
This isn't a suggestion, just a curiosity. how long did it take you to put like this
Yeah.
one
Example.
example together?
Well, I had to learn iPhone scanning. So that, it was about $68. So I'm thinking somebody that's a professional, and just knows how to put things together, like pulling shaping files into other files and stuff like that. It might take a third that time. But when you multiply it by 24, 25, it's probably a solid week's worth of work.
Yeah, absolutely. The only reason I ask is if, you know, knowing staff resources, I'm just wondering, as a question to the subcommittee, does it make sense to start with the most recent ones first and work your way back to the 1970s as opposed to starting in the 1970s and working your way up? And when we're looking at compliance, or do you think you can get it?
I was
either
just
way?
I was just starting for the first thing that was on the list.
Right, I'm talking about like workflow for future meetings, or it has the something we discussed that.
Well, we haven't discussed it.
Okay, so we have Catherine and then Jeff, and then I have some thoughts about how to do this. So Catherine, you're up first, please.
So just to clarify the comment there, this was kind of our working example, more internal than external. But that page 4 of the document is kind of the suggested format that we're looking at. So it's more that abbreviated version simplified with the source files and references. So you can go back and look at those sources on your own if you so choose to. And then the importance of the vetting maps and things that are referenced in these land use decisions that will help build that bigger picture and create that story. To your comment, Ginger, I just want to say that I really feel when we go back and look at the record, some of the justification for how we got here has occurred from the beginning. So there are impacts from the beginning that still exist today. So from the standpoint of trying to unravel what the picture of our conditional, the conditional use permits were, what kind of the context was, and that's some of what we were struggling with is what was the community, what was the Board of Commissioners intent, and that material in part is there too for all of the public hearings and actual land use decisions. There should be staff reports and community input and things of that nature. So I think we can do a very surface job of this, or we can kind of look at what was the original intent. Where did we achieve all of those intents? What were those conditions of approvals that were achieved and some that maybe were not? I know there's questions about that, but really just bringing in a very simplified way, in a very complete way and comprehensive presentation to this group. Here's the information we're working at from the iteration first of this landfill process all the way to where we are today. We're hoping it isn't going to be unnecessarily complex, so it's going to take some time. But I think that's kind of our plan, was that starting at the beginning. So we knew the foundations that got us to here, and the timeline that we mentioned, or that Ed mentioned, part of that too is that it appears that we could have overlying conditional use requirements. So we've got some that may extend into, I don't know how to say that, right? We wanted to explore to make sure we didn't have conflicting conditional use requirements that were overlapping on the timeline period. So that was our interest in that timeline request as well. Yeah.
We're seeing a comment saying that it's hard to hear folks, so if we can try to
Project.
For folks on the phone.
Project voices. All right, Jeff Condit, introduce yourself formally, please.
Yeah, Jeff Condit, I'm a member of the subcommittee and I'm an attorney for Republic Local Council. And I really didn't, I think people have clarified what I wanted to clarify. We really haven't agreed on the framework, the total framework yet. We want something that's readable and understandable. And we did have a conversation about the more recent decisions are the more relevant decisions to what's going to happen in the future. But so I just wanted to make that point. And the other point is that a lot of people have not seen the county's website where they had all of the documents from all of the decisions. And so people were going to go back and look at that too. And I did do that. I looked at those documents, and in fact, I printed them all out and put them in binders because I'm that kind of a guy. And it's several thousand pages of documents going back to 1974. So it is going to be, if we're going to do this in great detail, it is going to be a heavy lift. And it's going to be a heavy lift on staff. And we need to think about that going forward. So I just wanted to say that I think we are all trying to get to the point where Ed was talking about, where we have a simple, understandable sort of historical framework of what went on. But that may not be as simple as we're going to have some further conversation about how that's going to happen.
So let me just wrap up this. There'll be last call for all of you, of course, but so a couple things. The charge in the charter basically asks to look at what have been the past conditions and have they been complied with. In order to do that, what I'm hearing the subcommittee say is we need to have more background in these one-page summaries of these particular issues. And I don't think anyone is disagreeing with that. I do think there was a comment that we didn't have time to get to, which is to what extent, if any, should we triage these? I'll make up the number. I think Ed said it, 24 documents, and pick the ones that are most relevant, perhaps to begin with, and then backfill. We just haven't gotten to that mechanical level of the order in which we are going to do it. And it's not time and place.
You have to recognize that this one said the area to draw from is here. But that doesn't mean 5 pages down is going to reverse it or say something totally different.
It may absolutely be inevitable.
You just have to go through the work.
It may absolutely be inevitable that is what's going to happen. I'm just saying I want to leave out the option for the next subcommittee to have a more robust, because we just ran out of time. Final point I'll make, and I promise to call on you, Ginger, is that what I heard from the subcommittee meeting is superimposed on these CUP conditions. We have contracts with the county that impact this, and we have not, the subcommittee has not gotten to that level. So at some point, to get the whole meal big picture, you're going to have to integrate these documents, and then what do the contracts or the franchise agreements say for the landfill? And that's another step going forward. So I have Ginger, then Liz.
The only thing I was going to say is whatever you land on in terms of how you attack this has probably been the most helpful thing I've seen thus far. And I really appreciate the amount of work that obviously went into this. I know we were talking a few minutes ago about how it's really hard to find anything between the emails and the links and the documents that are going around, but just in terms of taking something from 50 years ago and putting it in a simple, easy to read format, this is really helpful, because sometimes I feel like I'm going blind trying to find information. So thanks.
Liz.
I just want to comment. I have a question on it. When we're looking at the map for the original intent, what is that for exactly? What we're focusing on?
It's for the regional landfill destination. The whole map is a regional landfill designation, watershed designation. And then those letters that you're scratching, I mentioned, those are about maybe 8 or 9 of the 20 or so chicken scratches there. And those are the ones that were directed to Coffin View. The other ones, quite frankly, I get tired of reading. I didn't bother looking where those are supposed to go. Just, as you said, not relevant.
So my comment is this, as you will lead me through all of the pages and pages of information, and we'll talk about when we get to the subcommittee items on, is it doesn't really matter what original intent for the area was, because the state of Oregon says you can't limit where anything comes from. So that's kind of an argument we have no power over. We can't, I'm not sure if we need to spend any time on it. I'm just saying maybe we pick and choose which things we expand on that we have an impact on and those that we don't.
Yeah, I think you got a good point there. And I think the gentleman that was in the public has a point of just tell me what's there. For me, part of the exercise is avoiding somebody going into the county records and say, aha, here's the magic piece. This stops and changes everything. It doesn't. And you put it, if you lay it out, so somebody can look at it, then you just tell them, oh, but just remember, these are what everybody committed to, and yeah, your memory from 20 years ago is correct, but it got superseded by something. End of dialogue, end of hostilities.
And I think some of these subcommittees are just overlapping so much, because in the legal subcommittee, we addressed some of this stuff, right? The order of the approvals, whether or not, what the actual definition of original landfill is, right? Like, I think as we share this, we're gonna be able to throw some of that work out, because it's not gonna be relevant for you to spend time on, given that we have only so much time. I mean, I know we've gotten a little bit of an extension, but 1,000 pages. Like, I can't even imagine having to go through that in a few weeks, right? Like, I don't know how you're gonna do that.
Pretty fast.
Yeah. All right. Just so conscious of the time here, I'll call on Brian, and then we'll go on to the next two subcommittees.
Just a quick question. I mean, I'm not a land use expert. I mean, but to these, so this one's from the 70s. Is the next one superseded? And then this one's no longer valid. So just some context as you're going through this. If that makes sense.
There's a bunch of them that don't have any bearing on it. Let me change this. If you're just worried about the area that you're drawing materials from, there's probably only 3 or 4 at most. If you're looking at conditions placed on the operation, you've got a bunch. For example, there's one liner that just says approval, and it shows a figure, and the figure is shows basically what looks like a leachate collection pond on the south side of Dolphin View, way west of where it is now. That they change it into my environmental eyesight instead of just reading the document. That tells me they had a leaching problem there that they had to fix. And that's okay. But it all gets back to what's your perception of the way the facility operates. So that one needs a little help. And that'll probably need some DEQ help for, okay, where's the permit for this? What does it describe? And that's a whole other aspect we haven't tried to tie together. So if I had a request, it would be to have a list of all the DEQ permits for the facility. Just number, and then DEQ has a good system. I'm going to use it. I'm going to get like number 306, which is the solid waste management permit for the facility. I just kept blocking it.
So perhaps the subcommittee then can put together a list of asks, and we'll give Brian about 6.5 hours to pull that together and send it back, analyzed with one-page summary.
Storage, and then people look through them.
All right, thank you very much. That was extremely impressive. The next committee up is a combination of 2 charges. It's topic A3, legal issues, and topic B1, land use review. Again, those A's and B's and C's are simply references back to the charge in the charter. While that group is teeing itself up, because this is our Halloween meeting, I stopped by C's Candy on the way here and bought a 1-pound box of C's Candy. I did not see it until just now, and you will see who has the box of C's Candy. And so the first issue is is there still a pound of See's candy in there before you pass it around and go forward? So you have to take off the little stickers underneath and pass that around. And Greg, would you like to start from here or here? Your choice.
Liz is actually gonna do.
Liz is doing it. Liz, you have the floor.
I don't remember.
I don't remember what I said at dinner time, Liz.
Okay, good. So I think, I'm actually really excited about this meeting, because I think there's a lot of stuff to rest, and it kind of sums up just, it's very cool. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm having a good time with some of it, so. So we were dealing with legal issues and land use review, and we talked until we ran out of time, and we'll probably do this next time. It was Mr. Condit, Mr. Crony, myself, Sam, and Greg that were part of it, and we have some people listening in as well. So the thing that I found most interesting is that it seems to me that there was a lot of conversation about whether or not Mr. Crony was the best man for the job. And I have to say that after spending some time with him, I have a lot of confidence that he has his head wrapped around this pretty well. And I wanted to just say that publicly because that was the topic of conversation that everybody was worried about. Not only did I feel like he had a pretty good grasp of what was going on, him and Mr. Condit have reviewed and looked over every piece of document for the most part that I can tell. I've put input on everything that's online for the most part. There's probably a couple little things here and there. And a lot of the questions that we had have already fundamentally been answered. If we just look at the documentation that's there already. So that's the first thing I want to say. I know it's not fun for us to read everything, but I think we're going to have to. Except 1,000 pages. I also found it interesting that the last Republic Service agreement between the County and Republic Service was a process of a 2.5-year agreement. And the words that they used, they parsed and discussed at length in regards to rights and obligations, right? So this wasn't something that they just jumped into, it had been thought about, had been looked at. And I think that that's also important to state, because sometimes we just jump to conclusions because we don't know the answers, that we assume everybody else does it. And I would hope that we don't take that stance. Past franchise agreements are no longer relevant to the current franchise agreement. So my background is real estate and lending, and when I do a purchase contract, when I see a purchase contract and when we get into the purchase contract, only the things specifically stated in the purchase contract and the events of the purchase contract are changed. Everything on the prior agreement stays the same. That is not how this works. So every new agreement is a new agreement. And we're not carrying things over for the fun of it. There's nothing that you have to keep going back stage after stage after stage to see if it's still there. Oh, sorry. I always told that super loud. So. I asked about the conditions on the previous approvals and use permits, and I said, who's tracking it and how? Right, as a conversation, and the answer was really staff to keep track of every condition. And I think it's important to know that that's probably a real reality that we all are going to have to deal with. The second piece is super important. They rely a lot on community input if they see something or they're worried about something. So we as are essentially in charge of making sure that things are being done and met and asking questions and not making those assumptions. The other person that's in charge of making sure that those obligations have been met is it's probably that's actually been tasked officially that job. So we confirmed we cannot tell anybody who can and cannot bring trash into the landfill. I think this keeps coming up. I hear it on the street. People are really annoyed that everybody brings their trash to Coffin View. But law says we cannot limit that. The only thing that Mr. Ferdy said we could limit is the amount of tonnage going in. So if there's a limitation that we want to put on the landfill going forward as a community, if you want to talk to anybody about it, it would be limiting the tonnage going in. There is also a lot of question of who's monitoring water, who's monitoring air, who's monitoring. A lot of those things are overseen by the DEQ, BSL, ODFW through the DEQ, or DEQ through the ODFW. I don't remember exactly how that works. And it's important to remember that federal and state law will trump essentially whatever we decided at the county level.
Doesn't Biden then, it just trumps it?
Well, listen, I am not an attorney, so I am not going to but so the federal government says we can't, this is how it is, there's no way for us to do that, okay? I also put the definition of a regional landfill because it's in the ORS, it's on that document. We don't have to wonder about what the definition of a regional fill, we don't have to speculate, we don't have to look, this is the definition out of the ORS. And that Mr. Crony also did a memo talking, and I don't know if we have that because it came in super late, so maybe next time. Where we're going to talk about ambiguous language because that seems to be a thing that people are worried about. We're also going to ask can or should the county consider DEQ permitting topics when assessing local land use applications? And we talked about this briefly, all of it's considered. They already take that into consideration when they're doing it, but we'll talk more about that. And our next meetings will be the 8th and the 15th from 4:30.
Questions, comments? Christopher and Catherine?
I thought I had a question, then I kept reading and I answered my question, so thanks for such a
Good
great
job. So Catherine and Ed?
I'm just curious when we talk about our other authorities on air, water, groundwater, so DEQ, Department of State Lands, you mentioned for sure. And there's the other one, not ODF, but what was the third one?
There's DSL, DEQ, ODFW, and
it might have been ODFW then?
yeah.
So with that, my understanding is that there are varying levels of authorities over a county per se, and sometimes that it's more of partnerships, memorandums of understandings, things of that nature. Is there opportunity, or have you considered looking at what measures have been taken by any of those agencies to look at Coffin Butte landfill and any of their impacts to the environment? And why I asked that question very specifically is I know that DEQ in one area of that, they may not necessarily, so they might work in, surface pollution or cleanup of an area, but they wouldn't automatically investigate groundwater, for example. So is there a way to look at what those records might be of what oversight from these agencies has occurred over the period of the life of this landfill, most importantly, probably currently?
Well, there's not a simple answer to that question. One of the things I was tasked with was trying to piece out the difference between the federal jurisdiction, DEQ jurisdiction, and the local jurisdiction. And it's complicated because DEQ actually administers the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act for EPA in Oregon. So it and the state law. So it is the agency that has the overarching environmental responsibility for this. And there are, I think, 3 different DEQ permits that Coffin Butte has to get and maintain in order to be able to operate. And there's a document that we submitted in the record that one of our consultants did that sort of outlined everything. And then one of the other things in the document is all the reporting requirements. So there's inspections, there's reporting requirements, there's analysis, so it's very complicated. Certain portions of that DEQ has reserved for itself. So it preempts the county from imposing any local regulations or by order in a manner that conflicts with the DEQ regulations. Now, there are some things DEQ regulates and some things DEQ doesn't regulate that the county can consider. And that's like a case-by-case analysis. So it is complicated, but we are looking at that.
Can I ask a follow-up question then?
Sure.
to that? Just then to clarify, would you anticipate coming back with that kind of a list of this is what DEQ preempts the county on, and this is what is within the county's authority? Or would you expect some sort of summary on that?
Well, I think we'll discuss the statutory analysis. I mean, within that framework, there are points that can be argued about. And I don't want to say we're going to come with a definitive answer, but we'll come to say, here's what the statute preempts, here's what DEQ regulates, here's what the county can do and can do in the past. And so one of the things we talked about is that the county, as part of its conditional use permit approval, and if you look at the historical conditional use permits, you will see that they do this, is they always impose a condition that we have to comply with the DEQ requirements, and any violation of the DEQ requirements is a violation of the county permit. And that is so that if DEQ finds a serious violation, then the county can say you're violating your conditional use permit. So that's one of the ways that the county and the state integrate the review. And under Oregon land use law, they're required to coordinate, which is why the DEQ requires the county to do the conditional use permit prior to them considering the overall permits. So I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, and we're going to try to boil this down in the document. And the document already contains sort of whose responsibility is what, and we're going to try to explain it a little better in layman's terms, and that we will attempt to do so.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Ed? One is just being picky, but it's on the second page, the top line. To simply put federal will override state. And strictly speaking, that's not true. Federal sets minimum. Under preemption, the states can be more restrictive than the federal government. They just can't be less. So that's what
That's right.
I can confirm that, yeah.
That's
And so I don't know if the county could be more restricted than the state.
No, I don't believe so. The thing that you're touching on a little bit, and that's kind of why I've asked for the DEP a couple of times. Mentioned having a list of permits. Some of the permits, at least one I saw referenced, was a RCRA permit. Early Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. It's a special law from the 70s, 76, I think. It has classifications for landfills, hazardous waste, and then non-hazardous waste. And the non-hazardous waste, Subtitle D, also has provisions for special wastes. And the special wastes have allowances for industrial waste and other types of materials. So where I'm driving this to is when we look at the permits and roll it back to the county things, we need to maybe change the image that this landfill accepts not just municipal waste, but also can accept these special wastes, which can be industrial wastes. And if my recollection is correct, during the tour, one of the gentlemen mentioned having a special screening process for sources of these special wastes, so they can make sure that they didn't get into the hazardous waste category, because that's a whole different thing. And then the landfill would be in violation of a whole bunch of federal laws. So we're right on the cusp of getting at some good information, but all of this is conjecture. So I encourage you to dig through, and I think we really need some help from DEP to lay out what is governing here. Because we're all kind of at an elephant.
Great, Louisa,
Can I just make a general comment?
please.
So, everyone's discussing, should we look into every part of the permit? Should we look into every part of the law? And maybe not for this committee right now, but we can make that as a recommendation. Because we're doing a community service, our community deserves to know this information. Make sure, in my observation, I don't know as much science stuff as you guys about this, but we don't have a plan since 1979. Like, our community deserves to have every little detail. But we might not do it in this committee, but you can say, oh, we looked at these, and then the next people need to look at more of the permits or look at more of the laws.
That's right.
All right, so thank you again, great information and great subcommittee work. Because of the time constraints, I do feel like I need to give the opportunity to the SMMP subcommittee, which is C1. So thank you for your patience. And Mike,
The headline that.
you're gonna do this from there. You want to do it from there or here? You want to do it from there or here, Mark?
I want to see you.
Okay.
Yeah, so, basically, we decided that the document that you all have been looking at, which is the solid waste management plan combined table of contents that Daniel put together, we decided that was an excellent reference document, but that the way that we were gonna work on this is we were going to pull out the major concepts from that, compilation of data. And then we were going to go through them one by one and each kind of know the priority that we assigned to this section and how we would summarize the purpose of that section. Then we might also add sections that would concern Benton County that maybe didn't concern the other municipalities that we looked at. And then our next task is to add back in and insert subsections underneath those skeleton topics based on our knowledge of sustainable materials management here in Benton County. And I just want to mention that the input from the folks that we had earlier in the program from neighboring counties who have been through this process is just awesome. That was just awesome information. And I want to say about our committee, we have a number of folks on our committee with deep and wide experience in the sustainable materials area. In fact, every one of them except me. And many of them, I'm sure, have attended numerous conferences and workshops on this subject over the years. And some of them deal with it daily in their jobs. And, some of them, like Brian, are charged to come up with a plan like this for his county. So I think we just have an excellent team here. And Ryan here from Birding Builders is going to join our team. And I think that is just going to be an awesome addition to our team because he can speak to the kinds of code changes that need to occur so that builders can actually build with having recyclable space in their projects. And I'm excited to hear what everybody's going to want to put into this document because I think it'll be a dynamite thing. I'm also hoping that we have some time to spend on the risks and responsibilities of our county, given that we do host a landfill here and you know what unique characteristics of that are. So anyway, I believe we have the expertise to produce a document that will form a strong nucleus for the eventual RFP that is issued seeking a sustainable materials consultancy firm to formulate sustainable materials management plan at the county. The end.
Bravo, bravo. Ryan, I do have one quick question for you. Did Marge tell you about the new member hazing ritual that happens at the subcommittee? She gave you a candy instead. Thank you all very much. So as I think you can see, we are now into that, solidly into that performing stage where we're teeing up the work, it's being divvied out, there's work plans in place. And I think you're gonna start to see, as these meetings go on, first, this little divergent thinking about all of this, and that's gonna come convergent, come together, and then Liz was saying, we're gonna take this aspect from this subcommittee with this aspect and this aspect, and then figure out the best order and what's needed and not. With regard, I said at the beginning, I would talk about the meeting evaluation. I'll simply leave it to your desire. If you'd like to fill it out. We'll send a reminder email tomorrow. The link is at the bottom of your agenda and whatever that ink blot thing is. You can do it that way. And we'll see what we can do. And again, reminder, the next meeting is not November 3rd, like it was. We're moving it to November 17th at 3 o'clock. So go forth to good, avoid evil. Thank you all very much. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
It says that there's an open house.
Oh, it is, okay. Oh, yeah, let me say a little bit about that.
Can you tell us what that
Yeah,
is?
yeah. So there's gonna be a public relations marketing notification push done by the county PIO. And everyone's gonna be invited to the first half of the meeting of this meeting. We'll have a formal work group meeting for the first half of our time there. Then there will be an open house. The contract is being formed. We suspect it will be 4 or 5 stations that for each subcommittee, there will be a station, by which I mean a table, a bunch of handouts, like 3-page, the then existing summary of the subcommittee's work at that table. Chart of the charge that will go into that, and the public can rotate through those stations and ask the work group members who are on that subcommittee questions. There'll be an opportunity for public comment. We might even have a questionnaire. So it may be that on our agenda is that the subcommittees come up with 1 or 2 open-ended questions or Likert scale questions that the public will answer, have a chance to answer at that station. And there'll be refreshments and what have you, but it's designed to open ourselves up to input from the broader community. So it's first half us with them hopefully observing, because there'll be the subcommittee reports. Second half, the big open house where we're inviting people in. Details to follow.
This is on the 17th.
Yeah. Yeah, second half of the 17th meeting.
But that's the next meeting,
Yeah.
Yes,
not the third, I think you said that.
yeah, third's gone. We're moving it to the 17th. That's where first half is the work group meeting, second half is the public meeting. It's my understanding that we're doing it here, and there was someone had their, oh, yes, Catherine.
Just clarification, so since we will not be meeting as a big group, I'm assuming some of the details and the prep work will happen in our subcommittees then?
Yes, so like picking up, what open-ended question or Likert scale question you might have, that would be done in the subcommittee.
And who's bringing the chocolate?
I'm happy to do it with chocolate. Did you like that chocolate? Is that not pretty sinful? Pretty darn sinful chocolate. All right, go forward to good, avoid evil. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and here's are you the keeper of the sign-in sheet? Yeah.
Rebuilding.